Yeah, buddy.
What is this, a rave?
Rave, baby. Rave day. No, that was Real Richard, everybody. Real
Oh, cool.
Richard.
That's my
Yeah.
homie.
You know Real Richard? Oh, I'm jealous.
I do. I've met him in person several times, and I actually
Nice.
have a couple of his music videos in
Ooh.
the art gallery on my site.
Oh, nice. Yeah, he gave us like his access to his drive so we can just go pick out. So we've been playing just random things from Real Richard. So we have somebody who's going to make us the actual theme song, so that's kind of cool. But in the meantime, Real Richard is hard to beat.
Yeah, that guy's talented.
He is. Hey, for those of you who don't know, TC and I were on the Bitcoin Veterans this morning. Do you have any carryover thoughts or
Well,
anything?
I just wanted to jump up and uh, I didn't mention like we hit a special block last night. 892,500 is the quarter mark of the halving. It's a big deal. It's
Oh wow, yeah, that
like
is.
we don't measure these things in time, although it's remarkably close to 4 years and a halving. So it's remarkably close to a year. I think the halving last year was on April 20th, and here we are, April 15th. Just last night we hit the quarter mark in terms of, it's 210,000 blocks in a halving. So we're a quarter of the way there. I find these milestones really meaningful, especially as you kind of go on your journey embracing a low time preference. There's there's a whole kind of timeline time chain on Bitcoin's protocol that is really amazing to pay attention to, and kind of gives you a whole nother context as far as the time passing in your own respective Bitcoin journey. So I find those things kind of significant.
Totally agree. Uh, say hi to Cosmo. Good morning.
Morning, guys. Awesome day. Sad I missed out on the Bitcoin veteran space. Sounds like it was good.
It was a great space.
Nah, we were
K,
just complaining about what's wrong with the world, you know.
so
Yeah, it's pretty
usual.
typical. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot to complain about. There's a lot to be optimistic about. So
Yeah, we were going deep. Going deep. KST, haven't seen you around. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I don't know. Like I've just been went to BitBlock Boom, which was super fun. Um
Jealous.
oh, it was great. I wish you were there. I wish you'd
I
come
know
and
I
bring.
haven't been since it moved to Dallas. I haven't been. I went twice when it was in Austin. Just this year again. I just couldn't make the logistics happen. But
You have to bring your beautiful wife. It was great. I think one thing that stood out for me was aside from HT's talk, of course, Bob Burnett had a great talk. It was really amazing. And he talked about how the competition for block space is going to get pretty intense pretty soon. And I think that's very, very interesting.
Yeah,
yeah,
Bob was on. Bob was on, and
Oh,
HT came on, and I was putting some equations together to try to figure out different relationships within the community, and I figured some stuff out all by myself. So I'll just leave it at that. TC, sorry, go ahead.
no, I don't have anything to add there except
Oh,
that
okay. Yeah, I didn't want to dox
is
anybody,
that
so go ahead.
HT's another one of my homies, and so is KST.
Oh,
I actually know
nice.
KST too.
Yeah, I would say more about that, but I don't want to dox anybody, so I will shut my pie hole. So,
No, Huddle
well,
Tarantula's
yeah,
his talk
HT.
his talk about off-grid mining is like absolutely legendary. I can only imagine he's doing some, evolution version of the same talk that I saw a couple years ago. Must be like even better of a presentation, as these things kind of tend to evolve that way. But it's mind blowing when you just kind of like wrap your head around what off-grid miners are doing. It's insane. Like all the challenges of actually mining Bitcoin, and then on top of that, doing it in remote locations and having to actually produce your own energy, and like all of the challenges. Like I mean, it's like a head exploding like realization when you wrap your head around it. And it's really important too, because those guys are the ones that are, the real loose cannons out there. No grid can shut them down. They're basically able to go right to the source of any energy source, and harvest that energy, convert it, utilize it, and mine Bitcoin, like out in the middle of nowhere, all over
In
planet Earth.
extreme weather conditions sometimes. And it's funny because during his talk, he goes through all of the things that you just wouldn't think about. And so like the audience, is listening, and then he gets to a slide and it's like the slide says, still interested in mining Bitcoin because it's so brutal.
I love the part in his talk where he's like starts talking about personal protective gear. And it's like a whole area that you probably haven't even really thought about in detail. You're like, wait a minute, all the ways you can get electrocuted out in the
Yeah.
middle of nowhere by yourself.
Or
Um,
caught on
yeah, or
fire.
like, chop off a limb, or yeah, it's mind bending what these guys do. So it's again, like if you're into Bitcoin mining, if you think that there's something interesting there, do yourself a favor and dive down the off-grid mining rabbit hole. It's a little subset, and it's pretty incredible.
yeah, those guys really are the ones who, in my estimation, really keep the network secure because if we ever hit a point where governments were able to obfuscate, there's definitely targets they could hit with all the big, well-established mining joints that are just, in these giant warehouses. But some of these guys out there are definitely, Bob has these classifications of different types of miners. I think he calls them like rabbits and horses and blah 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 blah. But they're kind of like the rabbits who could just scatter if need be. And I'm not saying we're getting close to that, because it looks like, as of lately, we've been getting better as far as the jurisdictional issues go. But it's still nice to know that they're out there. And Bob also mentions, like, do your part, and even if it's one of those little bit axes or whatever, do your part to keep the network secure.
I just got one.
Yay!
So excited.
For sure.
Yeah, I just put up in the nest, just another sort of like echo of this message that has been going on for years about the sort of centralization trends in Bitcoin mining. It's a real thing, and people, if you're not like on alert about that as sort of a major thing to continue to pay attention to, I urge you not to let that slip out of your mind. There's so many bullish things about Bitcoin, but there are these threats that are real,
Hey,
and
TC.
they're only stopped if people do something different, like these off-grid miners, like people like really trying to push the boundaries of plebs and small participants making a stand there.
Yeah, you actually mentioned, and we didn't go, it was kind of a can of worms that you threw out there in the last space, the Bitcoin veteran space, when you
I'm
were.
good at that.
Yes, you are. When you were talking about, the BIPs and the core devs and whatnot, if the wrong BIP, let's just say, got involved with an issue like you just said, where we had too much centralization in a pool, theoretically and technically, like something like that could pass because of that. So, I mean, I think ultimately it's not just, we were mentioning reasons to actually go do your own research on some of these things, but one of the points that was never made was, hey, there are potential vulnerabilities that we need to be aware of, and that's also another reason to go research these things. Did you want to just maybe not go deep on the technicals of some of this stuff, but just a basic overview? Because I know a lot of people aren't familiar with, the core devs, what the BIP process is,
Well,
etc.
I mean, it's honestly that's a bit of a different subject in a way.
Yeah.
um the just to tie a bow on the Bitcoin mining side of it. um here's a good way to think about it for someone who hasn't maybe thought about it too much. um there's a real big importance in Bitcoin. You'll notice it as you sort of study more about how Bitcoin works. There's a huge importance in randomness, also known as entropy, also known as chaos. um, we need there to be uncertainty about who wins the next block in Bitcoin mining. It's a big deal about the decentralization of Bitcoin, is that the next block, which again, remember, what is a block? What does it do? It does two really important things, amongst other things. It issues new Bitcoin. There's a subsidy in there that's new Bitcoin generated by the protocol, handed out to the winning miner. And then there's transactions that are chosen from the mempool and put into the block and added to this permanent record of transactions. So those two critical things happen every time there's a new block. So now, if we have some certainty about who is going to win the next block, well, now you can apply some sort of, manipulation in a sense about which transactions are included. It touches on censorship issues, touches on issues of, you know, is it possible for someone to 51% attack the chain and rewrite the chain? These kinds of questions, they all fall back, maybe another way to say it is the safeguard against those problems is this uncertainty about who's going to win the next block. So if we have too much certainty about who's going to win the next block, that is incredibly problematic for Bitcoin's decentralization, for its permissionlessness, and all those things. And that is a sort of an important concept that hopefully people can carry with them, that's not too heavy and technical. It's just you want to be sure that we're rolling dice and getting a random outcome every time a new block is happening. And there's times when Foundry USA rattles off 8, 9 blocks in a row. We have this expression now amongst certain people. They say ant pool and friends because there's like a whole cohort of miners that are all using the same template as Antpool and sending their block rewards to the same addresses as Antpool. And so really what looks like, half a dozen or a dozen pools is really functioning as one pool, as one entity. So that's what that tweet I put up in the nest is about. And that's like in a nutshell the problem with these centralizing trends in Bitcoin mining that people are talking about these days. And now there's exciting things happening, like all the plebs that are getting into mining through Bitaxes and stuff. Maybe a certain percentage of them get into mining in a more serious or robust way. We were talking about off-grid miners. Like there's so many different people participating, and it's important to remember that's an open part of Bitcoin. Like everything else, anyone can start mining Bitcoin. It's just you've got a lot of sort of incumbent entities that have been there for years and are incredibly dominant because they figured out what the game is, and they amassed insane amount of hash rate, and they operate in a way that suits their incentives. So I just think it's an area that people should stay eyes open and aware that there's not a resolution there quite yet, and there's kind of like a trend or a tendency in Bitcoin mining to continue to centralize with fewer, larger entities. So you want to root for more entities. You want to root for more different pools, more different people choosing those templates so that long term, when you want to get your Bitcoin transaction through, you don't have to worry about, well, I have to wait for this specific entity to win a block for me to even have a chance to get a transaction in. That's the point. And if you care about Bitcoin long term, if you're bullish on Bitcoin long term, this should be something that's, front of mind, or at the very least on the back burner, that you continue to check in with and pay attention to. Now, that has all nothing really to do with the stuff that's going on with Bitcoin Core and the core developers and BIPs, but if you want to get into that, we can.
Yeah, let's say hi to some of the other folks that have joined us on the stage. I guess we can still say good morning to some of the folks who, because it's still before noon. Good morning, Tomer. How are you?
Hey, good morning. Just listening in right now.
Good to see you.
You too.
Thomas, howdy.
Hey, good morning, Loren. I'm interested in just thinking through one aspect of Bitcoin that everyone seems to gravitate to as a core foundational element is the decentralization. And as TC was really kind of talking about, we see the decentralized, one of the elements of decentralized mining, it's centralizing to these pools. It is important for us to think about the tendency for efficiency, for monetary gains, et cetera, for the ecosystem to centralize, whether it be through ETFs on ownership. That's makes it a lot easier. I know, not everybody's going to want to do self-storage, but people need to understand that centralized behaviors are antithetical to a decentralized architecture. And while we may do some centralizing things for matters of convenience, we have to protect against the whole ecosystem degrading, where we lose a key beneficial aspect, which is the decentralized architecture of Bitcoin that protects it.
Sorry, I was over trying to reply to some
Go ahead,
comments.
Tomer.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to share as I did yesterday because it's not always the same listeners every day. In the nest, the 2-hour Twitter Spaces that we did on Sunday, in my Bitcoin Philosophy Sundays theme, which was all about decentralization. And since Thomas brought it up, it was a really good discussion about understanding the implications and the uniqueness of decentralization. And I think the quick point I'd make is to try to provide people with motivation to give it a listen and to go down the understanding decentralization rabbit hole, is like Bitcoin is presented as decentralized money, and money is something that everybody thinks they understand to some degree. They're not, you don't mention the word money to people and their face goes all cockeyed and crooked and like, what the hell are you talking about? I've never heard of this thing money. But you'd use the word decentralized and people have no idea what it means. And Bitcoin is this radically decentralized entity that's more decentralized than anything in the world we know. It literally has no leaders, no masters, no employees, no money, no nothing of a centralized nature in any way, shape, or form. So we had a really long conversation about it that went down a lot of interesting angles. Knut Van Holm joined us towards the end. It was a really good discussion. So for people who are interested, and I hope you are, there's a good discussion to be listened to the next time you're, stuck in your car for a little while or whatnot. So I'll share it in the nest right now. Awesome.
Yeah, on top of that, I'm curious what you think, Tomer, and anyone else who wants to chime in on this. I'm trying to picture what the future of like the decentralized aspect of Bitcoin looks like. And obviously it doesn't succeed if the network doesn't stay decentralized and secure. But if this is going to be used as like global collateral or global currency, there are going to be some centralizing forces that come into play because frankly, there are a lot of people who are too lazy, who aren't, capable of maybe dealing with Bitcoin in a complete decentralized way. What do you think are the things that we would look out for, and how do you think it like pans out in a way that Bitcoin stays decentralized, but people are able to kind of have some of the conveniences of centralization?
Yeah, I mean, I saw TC's hand go up, so I'll try to make a quick answer, and then I'm eager to hear what he has to say. I think the important thing to recognize is just because other people are using centralized services as a proxy for Bitcoin, well, first of all, they're not getting all the benefits of Bitcoin. They're not getting the self-custody, the censorship resistance, all sorts of other things. But just because other people aren't using it that way doesn't mean you can't use it that way, right? It's a self-sovereign decision to take advantage of the benefits that Bitcoin offers you. You can participate in Bitcoin or not. No one's forced to use Bitcoin. No one's forced to use Bitcoin in any particular way. And so it's an election to take right to uh, your right to transact permissionlessly with other people is an act of is a self-directed, self-initiated act, and Bitcoin is still and likely to remain extremely decentralized in that insofar as it'll let you do that. There's things you can do to contribute to ensuring that it remains decentralized if you're if you value those features, and those things include things like running a node and contributing to the mining pool and contributing to educating other people to self custody as well. And that way you can sovereignly deal with them. So I'll just leave it at that quickly. I could go on longer, but I know TC's always got some really wise things to say about this. I see his hand is up again.
Yeah. I want to expand on that. Like to me, there's so many different ways in which people interact with Bitcoin, but I focus on basically three different sort of roles or three different activities that people tend to be involved with, and they all have different implications as far as decentralization of Bitcoin. So, number one is, self custody. Obviously, take any of these things to an extreme. If everyone just bought Bitcoin on Coinbase and left it there on Coinbase, or if everyone just bought ETFs, or if everyone just bought MicroStrategy, you don't have like anybody actually owning Bitcoin. And that's the thing, is like, to actually own Bitcoin and use Bitcoin, you've got to self custody it. So we want people to continue to self custody it. And then you have the nodes. And the nodes, I would argue, are one of the most important factors as far as decentralization. You want to be able to, run your own instance of Bitcoin. You want to be able to have your own copy of the entire chain with all the transactions. And when you have your own copy of the entire chain, you yourself can verify the entire supply of Bitcoin at any point down to the Satoshi. You can verify your incoming and outgoing transactions and exactly what state they're in. You can verify your entire personal UTXO set, which is your Bitcoin that you hold. And, again, like that's to me the second half of self custody, which I used to think was nice to have or somewhat optional. And these days, I don't think of optional at all. I think if you self custody, you ought to be incentivized to run your own node because you can achieve sovereignty at that point. You have, autonomy at that point. You're not depending on anybody else for finding out your balance or transacting. And then sorry if this is going on long. Lastly, the mining. That's something else that, a lot of people, they, understand that mining occurs, but they don't even start looking into it. And, the incentives that exist in the mining field are centralizing in general because whoever mines and they get a taste of what that's like to get Bitcoin directly from the protocol, they know, ooh, I want more hash rate. I want to get more. I want to be more competitive. That's the natural incentives for anyone. So what has ended up happening? A bunch of humans have basically discovered, oh, this is difficult. There's all this variance in how much income I'm making. Ooh, look at, I can mine with a pool and I can get the same steady amount of sats, every day from my hash rate. And that's what a lot of people have decided to do. And that's why we have this problem with all these mining pools becoming so big. The smaller pools end up teaming up with the bigger pools to kind of reduce their own variance within their smaller pool. And next thing you know, you got ant pool and friends. You got these situations where all these mining pools are colluding in the background. And you're like, wait a minute, there's really only like half a dozen entities that are winning like 95% of the blocks. It's crazy. So, the decentralization of Bitcoin, basically, to sum it up, requires people to care about this thing enough that they actually start participating on these other levels. It's one thing to pay attention to number go up. It's one thing to be excited about, oh yeah, freedom money, like the meme of it. But like the truth is, you needed self-custody your Bitcoin, or else you don't own any. You should run your own node, or else you're dependent on other people to even verify what your balance is and what the supply of Bitcoin is out there. And you need to probably mine Bitcoin too, because long term, the centralizing trends in Bitcoin mining are scary. We do not want a situation where it's one of two or three gigantic entities that are deciding what transactions make it into blocks. It's one of these things where Bitcoin on and on and on forever. As soon as you start really looking at it and really understanding it, it's demanding that you participate. It's demanding you to actually step up and put your actions where your thoughts are. So you like this thing, you care about this thing, self-custody, run a node. That's baseline. That's nearly free to do. If you care about mining, at the very least, pay attention to what's going on in mining. If you can, and you have access to energy that allows you to be competitive, by all means, jump in, start mining. But this is the decentralization of Bitcoin. Is in my mind, it's those three kind of roles, those three activities that not everyone really even takes seriously that they need to do.
Yeah, and to all those listening, I feel like I understood Bitcoin to an extent, but the moment that it clicked and it really made sense is when I sent Bitcoin over my own node. I feel like my ears were ringing the whole day. Like that moment for me was like the moment it all clicked in. And so, even if you're like, well, I mean, everybody else is running a node, you should, but also do it for your own edification. Really like dig into this, get your hands in there, get your hands dirty and figure this thing out because the technology is incredible. And the moment that you do that, you feel the power of the sovereignty that Bitcoin gives you. It's really incredible.
No,
Uh,
I was just on a thing with BTC Sessions and Pierre Rochard where we ran the RPC command that gets the actual supply down to the Satoshi at the current moment. And it is so empowering if you just run a command on your computer and a minute later you see the exact supply of Bitcoin at that moment that everyone in the world can verify. I mean, just think about like how much people have been like, oh yeah, audit the Fort Knox gold. Oh yeah, audit the Fed. I'd audit the IR. Fuck that. Audit Bitcoin your damn self. Like run your own node. God.
So if I send that line of code to the Fed, they won't give me their full audit. That's not going to happen.
No, get UTXO set output is not gonna work with the Fed, unfortunately.
Ah, we were almost there. We almost did it, guys. Let's see. We got a few more hands. I only see two. I think I missed a few. But I see Rusty and Eric. I think Rusty was first, and then we'll go to Eric. And if you had your hand up as well, if you could go to the little heart, put your hand down and back up again, and then we'll be able to see it.
Hey guys, I'm gonna try and be as brief possible. Take a quick sidebar, just because it was like floored me this morning. I was in a space with Dilly, who frequents place, and George, and he invited Marianne Bartels. Well, she's the CIO of Sanctuary. She's a long time old Merrill Lynch chart technician. So the conversation's going, and the question was, "Hey, well, what do you see coming in the future? What do you see down the pipeline?" Out of the blue, she goes, "Well, I relate this world today kind of like Star Trek. You had Captain Kirk with the flip phone, and then later on, you had the iPad view." Kept going. She goes, and then they had the holograms, which we have. She goes, and then she out of the she goes, and now we have Bitcoin. And you have to listen to it. It's about 36 minutes in. And I was like, wait, what? And she starts going on. She goes, that in Star Trek, she goes, I'm a Trekkie. She's like, you had this currency, right? She goes, I was trying to figure out what would be the currency. She said, you have this, I can't remember the name of it, but she related it to the gold. And then you have this other, which was a credit. And she goes, that's the blockchain. She goes, now all the other stuff in crypto is technology. She goes, and the central banks, I see them going towards maybe tokens, but Bitcoin is the currency. You have to listen. She says it so beautifully. I'm butchering it for anyone who may have been in the space, but I was just like, what in the world? Like, I couldn't believe my ears, because it's just like, this is old school tradfi. I was just like blown away. Billy and I were like, what is happening? I can't believe this. So I had to toss that out there, because I was just like,
Were you
how
were
is
you
not
able to like, or was anyone on the stage able to like pull that thread with her? Because
I
it's one thing to
yeah, I'm
like
like,
have that sort of metaphor, but like,
yeah,
that's
I
exactly the
I
kind of
got it.
person that needs to run a node to kind of like take it to the next level of, understanding about, what
Yeah,
it
so
really
she
is.
she said she goes and so she's older, and she said she always uses this example when she talks. So she goes, sorry, but boomers. And she said, because back in the 1500s, we had the sundial, yet we were farming. She goes, technology is here. She goes, we're in the first inning. She goes, I see this thing lasting for 300 years minimum. She goes, now, will it convert? I don't know. But she said, this is here to stay, and it's a long ways out. And I was just like, I just couldn't believe it. I was here, and I was like, this is amazing. And she's very successful. You can look her up. I mean, well respected. But I just was like, that took a left turn quick into an area I was not expecting. Because here she was talking about the Fed and everything like that. And then it was just like, oh, yeah, no, here's an area that I'm really attracted to, and the blockchain and everything aspect of it, and how Bitcoin is the currency. It's the credits and debits world, yet all the other stuff is just technology and tokens and everything. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what I'm hearing. So I just had to share it with the group. But if you find this space, I'll try and grab it and send it to a couple of you guys. So anyway, it was an amazing moment. I was just like, whoa. So I had to just tell y'all. Sorry, I know it took a side turn here, but anyway, I wanted to share.
Yeah, we'll have to get a copy of that. I've been interested in listening to that. But we got Eric with a hand up, so go over to Eric.
Yeah. Hey, so Rusty, that lady at Merrill Lynch probably just got her pink slip about half an hour ago for this morning. That is pretty awesome.
Oh, she don't have to worry. She's not at Merrill. She's at Sanctuary. Her aunt got her into it. Her aunt was the very first lady ever allowed on the trading floor, is what she said. It was a really interesting conversation.
Wow.
She shared a lot. It was pretty cool. But yeah,
Yeah. See if
I'll
you can rip that. I'd
grab
love
the
to hear
clip.
that.
Yeah, it was amazing the way she explained it. Like I said, I just butchered it, but it was really cool.
Well, TC, I love when TC comes. I don't see him here anymore, but there you are. When TC, when you're on here, dude, it's kind of like I was an athlete, and you just gave like the most incredible Bitcoin halftime speech I've ever heard. Self custody, run a node, mine. These are three basic things. Decentralization is like freedom. Freedom isn't free. We all have to participate in a network, and self custody being the main thing. I think Dark talks about this a lot, but I would highly advise all of you, if you have a chance to look up The Great Taking by David Webb, because this book, number one, is fantastic and free, and the guy did it for nothing. But he describes in there very well that ownership is an illusion in the modern legal structure of American asset base. One of the examples that kind of shook me to my core was a car, right? So I have two cars. I paid my cars off. I own those cars. In my world, I own those cars, but the VIN numbers are still on the loan that the dealer got against those cars. So if the dealer goes bankrupt, my car is still collateral for a loan. Bitcoin is really one of the, along with gold, might be the only two true bearer assets that are left in our economy. So if you're not self-custody, and I'm all for ETFs, I'm all for all that stuff, but an ETF becomes a share. A share is owned. It's, I believe, the DTCC ends up owning that. The only thing you truly own in this world is your life, your breath, and Bitcoin. You could probably throw gold in there as well. So the self-custody issue, I think, is a topic we all need to talk about a lot with new people. And more importantly, I think there needs to be there. By the way, for anyone who's not doing self-custody right now, there are thousands of really good videos on how to take self-custody of Bitcoin that you can easily find. Some of them are less than 5 minutes. The process is scary. Same thing when I sent money on my node. It was an eye-opener to me to see like the realization of the freedom. But I'll also say the first time I took self-custody of Bitcoin from an exchange was the most nervous moment in my life. Just, you miss one number and you're screwed. And I had a friend who did this. He wanted to move Bitcoin. I just had him on my podcast. He was bummed out when I started talking to him. And I was like, what's going on? And he's like, I just lost half of my Bitcoin moving it from an exchange. And I'm like, man, please give me or anyone else a call next time that happens. But TC is dead on. This is something, ironically, TC, I hopped on here. I've got a 12 o'clock and I'm like, I got an hour to kill during the workday. And I was going to put a post out about, if you're not running a solo Satoshi, what are you waiting for? $180 device, if nothing else, will contribute hash to the network. Hash is the security model for the network itself. And we have seen, I don't quote me on this, but I think we've seen 7 solo miners in the last 12 months hit a full block. Like I go to 7-Eleven all the time to get gas and my Zen and all that kind of stuff. And every time I go in line, there's 3 or 4 people buying lottery tickets, and they never, absolutely ever win. And those become wasted paper in a garbage bin, where at least like a solo miner is pretty much the same odds of the lottery. But at the same time, even if you're burning that capital and energy in your home, you're contributing to the hash rate. You're protecting your own investment with Bitcoin by adding to that hash rate. So I try to talk about those topics because that's what brought me into Bitcoin, was understanding true bearer assets. So thank you,
I
TC.
think I think you have greater odds for sure
Yeah,
with a
the odds are
solo.
better than a lottery ticket for sure.
Yeah.
The thing is that the act of running a bidax is awesome because you're beginning to actually get firsthand contact with the activity. I kind of still hesitate to echo the sentiment that you're like helping secure the network when you're running a bidax. In theory, that's true, but in reality, it's not as much. It's kind of more like if you run a bidax and you enjoy it and you start learning more about how Bitcoin mining actually works, and then you discover you have a real passion for it, and you start actually moving forward and doing it on a more serious level, it's I think that's the point that you're starting to actually make a difference outside in the network. But here's the good news. All of these aspects of decentralization, all of these activities that I was mentioning in my rant, they're all things in your own incentive. And I think it's a brilliant turning point in when I look back on how I started like wrapping my head around Bitcoin, is that it's not about doing these things for the network. It's about doing these things for yourself. It's the magic of the design of Bitcoin, is that all of these pieces of architecture that Satoshi put together to create this system feed on human incentives, and it's humans incentives to want to have sovereignty and to want to see yourself grow and gain and survive and thrive in all these ways. And so there's real intense beneficial self incentives in all of these activities: running a node, mining, self custody. You don't need to do it philanthropically for the sake of the network. Just look at how these activities actually directly benefit you in a major way. That's all you need, and you'll find the motivation to seek out doing these things more.
Also, the best orange pill opportunity of your life, when someone comes over and goes, "What's that thing over there making all that noise?" And you have a chance to talk about the network. That's kind of why I'll be honest, that's why I started one solo miner in my house, because I have a mining operation in Tennessee. So when people come over, they're like, "What is that thing?" I go, "Oh, that's a solo Bitcoin miner," and you get a chance to explain how the network works. And I would say
Dude, I'm in California.
50%.
I'm like cringing because I got whopped by my utility company when I tried to mine at home. I think 40 something cents per kilowatt hour was what I got hit with. So, some people can do
40?
it and some can't. Oh yes, California. Fun.
Oh, wow. There's another reason why I left and moved to Texas.
Yeah, to your point though, TC, I think it's a participatory thing, right? So you can sit and read a book about whatever you want to do, whether it's like, I don't know, and any hobby, coding, flying planes, RC cars, any kind of thing. But you can sit there and read a book about it for a month, 2 months, but it's a whole different, world when you get in there and get your hands dirty and start working it yourself. Then you really start to understand the idea, the hobby, the topic, right? And so, you can read all these books or listen to these conversations about mining, but if you really want to understand it, the best thing you can do is, get in there and start working away. Let's see. I think we had another hand, but I lost it. Lauren, do you see any?
I saw that hand. We're in church now. No, but I did want to shout out to some other folks that just jumped up here. Dark Side, Puncher. I see a hand now. Cosmo, do you see that hand?
Yes, I do. Yeah, let's go to Calabar.
Yeah, good evening from Calabar, Nigeria, and Bitcoin Today. Listening out to all of these, I mean, run a node, run a bit axe, and all of that. Um, to How do I put this? Putting it in context right now. Last week we just finished, I think, a 6 days boot camp where we walked some young guys and young females, through the Bitcoin, Bitcoin education and all of that. Now, what was their primary challenge, or what could they relate more to? They could relate more to the fact that, I mean, Bitcoin in itself is decentralized, and Bitcoin in itself, helps cure inflation. Relating Bitcoin to how much inflation the naira has gotten and all of that, and it was the sweet contact point, to get these kids to settle down and put their heads together to understand why they need Bitcoin. And hopefully we'll be able to, that curiosity will keep sparking and, push them down the rabbit hole. But altogether, Bitcoin today, what does an average African need Bitcoin for, right? We need Bitcoin for a whole lot, apart from just inflation issues that I think most African countries experiencing right now. Censorship. I myself, my name is James Otudo behind the handle, and this is not even my primary account, right? My primary account has been suspended since December. All my socials were suspended. I had some censorship issues. And what kept me, what kept me afloat was just the fact that, Bitcoin, I have Bitcoin friends I'll reach out to and all of that, all of that, all of that, right? Why the censorship coming? Because I sued the government, trying to make sure they recognize that every Nigerian has the right to hold Bitcoin and trade Bitcoin. And we went to court and we are still in court anyway.
You
So,
sued the government for that? That's interesting.
yes, that has been since last year. We have done five. We have done five sittings on the particular case. I didn't just sue the government. I sued the government and all its parastatals that are involved in the whole supposedly regulations and all of that kind of stuff like that. We have done about five hearings and five adjournments, and the next one will be next month on the 25th year of May, 25th of May. That's when the next date is adjourned to. But however, eh, recently we just had the SEC, Nigerian SEC, categorize Bitcoin as a security, in a bid in trying to regulate the whole space and all of that kind of shit. And they rugged in Bitcoin in and as a security.
How recent
Recently,
was that?
why
Was that like in the
that
last
that that,
year?
that was last week. No, that was just last week.
Oh, no way.
And this was after our lawsuits. In fact, the interesting part was that last year, immediately our lawsuits became very public, and it went around newspapers and blogs. I think the next week the SEC decided to start licensing crypto companies rather. Two crypto exchanges got licenses, Aquedax and Busha, and this thing they call ARIP. It's more like a how they it's the cohorts, and they'll ask you to apply and blah 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 blah. So we saw a lot of shitcoiners come in, bring in their own, try to get licenses for different shitcoin products. We even have one now, a Nigerian stable coin called CNGN, which is coming to be like USDT and all of that kind of stuff, but built on the naira, right? But the question is, do we still need all of these? We don't need all of this, right? Why can't the SEC just, or why can't the SEC listen to will I say, for me, I'll call it superior reasoning, and just stick to what will help the country grow, right? But however, they are human beings and they are government, and we understand how they operate. So we ended up seeing about 10 entities being licensed as at last year, two being crypto exchanges that have also gone ahead to create their own shitcoin and shield their own shitcoin and all of that. As at 2 days ago, we had a popular crypto scam called CBEX, had gone haywire, and people had lost money to the tune of 1.3 trillion naira. That's what is in the news right now. People losing money to a scam of 1.3 trillion naira. And here we're having the SEC coming, hey, we say this is a scam and blah 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 blah. So the whole point now is, if you're a builder, if you are you're a creator, or if you're just playing and you're just doing your stuff, on Bitcoin. In fact, if you read the ISA, I mean the whole document on the law that is just passed into the bill they just passed into law, everything was done hush 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 quietly. Bitcoiners didn't have much to contribute. People didn't have much to contribute. The SEC just went in, did their thing, and went out, and boom, there's a law. Everybody must comply with the law. But people fail to understand that these guys fail to understand that, look, if I use Bitcoin, I mean, it doesn't come from a single issuer, right? I mean, anybody can mine Bitcoin. I mean, I could run a BitAxe in my
Calabar,
house.
Calabar.
Yeah, I can hear me. Yeah, I
When are you
can hear
gonna
you.
land this plane, buddy?
Oh,
Take
I
us
think I
down in
just landed the
37
plane.
seconds, if you don't mind.
I think I just landed the plane. But
Okay.
in a nutshell, Bitcoin today is becoming more diverse, and I think lots of we from this part of the world, will hook up to Bitcoin because it gives us a lot of alternate options. And I think I'll just rest my case right here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really interesting. I think it's I want to look into that because it's kind of funny. Usually, the rest of the world kind of follows the SEC on some of this stuff. So I think that there's obviously some corruption there to some extent if you have the SEC of Nigeria that's deciding that Bitcoin is a security and not a commodity. Because number one, I don't see how anyone could make that judgment that it's some sort of security, like there's some central issuer. That's bogus. And so I don't know. It might, you know, it might seem like a ploy to protect their own currency if they are going to issue. What it sounds like to me, what you're describing is a CBDC of Nigeria, which would be a serious issue because from what I understand, there's a large amount of adoption of Bitcoin, like per capita, it's the largest in Nigeria, from what I understand. But yeah, we'll come back to you on that. But I want to go to Feather. He's had his hand up for a bit, so we'll run over the Feather and then come back to you, Calabar.
Hey, thanks for having me up. Um, so actually, it looks like TC is a listener now, but I was gonna.
No, he hopped back
No, I'm
in,
here. I'm
so you're
back
good.
up.
Oh, you are sweet, cool. I was gonna see what you thought. I also I live in San Diego and also pay 41 cents kilowatt for electricity, which is crazy. But I did just recently start. It started, I think, watching like a Bob Burnett video and then some BTC sessions videos, and was kind of motivated to um, run my own node and start hashing and stuff. So I got a future bit and a bidax, and I kind of, you mentioned something about not really needing to do it for the network, but I kind of wanted to push back a little bit. I feel like kind of like what you guys were talking about a little earlier with the centralization of all the mining pools and everything. I do feel like we do need more individuals, even though it is just like a drop in the bucket. Like obviously my bidax is doing next to nothing alone, but I just wanted to see what you thought as far as like, is it important to kind of get people motivated to maybe, run like the datum and mine with Ocean? Just want to hear your thoughts on that. Just for the ability to in the future, if block space is as scarce as somebody like Bob Burnett thinks it will be, um, it does seem like it could be important to have a, more of a less centralized mining operation, I guess, to be able to get transactions through. Just want to see what you guys thought about that.
Yeah, look, I would say it's important to keep your eye on what is your core incentive. Um, from my point of view, and I have, 3.5, almost 4 years of experience mining myself, although I am doing it. Sorry about that phone call. I am doing it in a hosted manner because of how crazy the cost of energy is to try to do it myself. But my incentive to mine Bitcoin is very simple. I want to earn Bitcoin at a discount. Like that should be your core incentive for mining Bitcoin is that, oh, the price today is what, 85,000. Okay. Oh, sorry, another phone call. I'm gonna have to call that person back. The mining maybe gets me Bitcoin at the price of like 70K or like 60K or whatever it is. And that's a lovely discount on some Bitcoin. And that's fundamentally how you ought to be looking at it. Am I making Bitcoin at a discount or am I paying a premium for the Bitcoin? Some people may rationalize paying a premium for their Bitcoin because maybe they really want to prioritize having KYC free Bitcoin that they acquire without their identity tied to it. Bitcoin mining does that for you. So there's another core incentive. Again, none of these things have to do with like chipping into the network or saving Bitcoin for everybody else. It's like self incentive. Do you want Bitcoin at a discount? Are you trying to get some KYC free Bitcoin? So that's the foundation level of like your decision making when you go into this. Now, if you get something like a bidax, the unfortunate fact of it, especially if you're mining with a pool, even if you're mining with Ocean, where you're able to, integrate Bolt 12 and get paid out in Lightning and actually get some Sats sooner than a couple years from now, you're never going to earn back as many Sats as the bidax cost you. The way to price that is you have to look at what is the $180 in Bitcoin today. Like if you had taken that money instead of buying a bidax and you bought Bitcoin with it, how many Sats you would have. That is your bar to break even. And then of course, as you're consuming energy, and the bidax consumes such a small amount, but still over time, you price that energy in Sats according to as you're spending it, how many Sats you would get for that, the dollars spent. So you price everything in Sats, you're never going to make back as many Sats as you've spent. So you're never going to actually mine profitably unless you lottery mine and hit a block, which is playing the statistical game. And yes, there's been really exciting run of solo miners hitting blocks recently. But the truth is the vast majority of people that do that are never going to hit a block. So, really, I find it useful to just be brutally honest about what the incentives and realities are with Bitcoin mining if you're going to start participating. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't get a bidax and run it and try it out. Maybe it's just a super valuable experience to get a feel for it and better understanding and better perspective and learn how it works. I'll tell you one thing that is just stuck with me that's so important is I watched when I started mining at first what a certain amount of hash rate got me a day in Sats. And then I watched that plummet, and it's something like 90% down from where it was in the summer of 21 for the same machine with the same amount of hash rate. And that is eye opening. That is another way to look at and understand the hash rate on the network growing. My steady amount of hash rate, and consider whatever your bidax is doing, it's doing that same amount over time. Meanwhile, the hash rate on the network is growing. So your drop in the bucket is actually smaller relative to the total bucket as time goes on. And that's another really useful thing to actually experience, because it's one thing to hear somebody say it, it's another thing to actually put out the expense, do this activity, and learn it firsthand. But I just my overarching opinion on it is like just running a bidax is not the ultimate like activity. It's great if you learn, it's great if you have fun, it's great if it's something that gives you pleasure and knowledge. But the next step would be, okay, this Bitcoin mining is awesome. I have a decent cost of energy. Let me get some actual like meaningful hash rate. Let me try to actually earn some sats at a discount and actually fulfill that primary incentive, which should be driving you to this activity or not. Otherwise, if really you care about the amount of sats you own going up, most people should just buy sats. They should just buy Bitcoin and stack them into cold storage, especially if you live in California and pay these energy prices.
Yeah,
TC, are
and
you able to through what you're doing on the mining, are you able to get Bitcoin at a discount, or is that a theoretical example? Because when I look at the bidax
Yeah,
economics, it's like you're going to get 10 or 20 cents a day. Your most electricity bills will eat that up. You'll never return the cost of capital. So it's not a
that's
good.
exactly what
It's
I'm saying. With a bidax, you're not competitive enough. See, what's happening is these machines that have a low amount of hash rate are just not as efficient as the larger machines. And so as you scale up the hash rate, you're getting better efficiency, which means the amount of sats you're getting for energy spent increases. And
so can you
to
share?
actually,
Can
sorry, go
you
ahead.
share some of the economics for your operation? Because it sounds like you're able to get a Bitcoin at a discount based on the way you're doing it.
yeah, I'm curious as well, because I thought it was pretty much almost always better to just buy Bitcoin straight up unless you had like a
Yeah,
serious.
you need cheap energy. So when I started, it was a an important part of my learning curve was I started mining with a company called Compass Mining. And to be clear, this should not be ambiguous to anyone. I do not recommend anybody do that. Okay, that was a learning experience. I'm grateful that I started mining when I did, but I'm really glad that I'm not using that service anymore. But that being said, one S19 at 100 terahash was earning something like 100,000 sats a day when I was starting in the summer of 21. And that same machine today is earning something like 12,000 sats a day. It's a stark difference. It's shocking actually when you realize your productivity is guaranteed to go down because the competition on the network is guaranteed to go up. This makes it incredibly challenging to forecast and calculate what your experience is going to be a year from now, let alone several years from now. And you have this realization hit you like a ton of bricks when you do mining over a couple years that, holy crap, if I don't increase the amount of hash rate that I personally control, if I don't continue to pursue cheaper energy inputs, I absolutely fall off. So, with Compass Mining, I had some miners at some facility for at 6 cents kilowatt hour. I had one ASIC in a Russian facility at 4 cents, which was awesome until the sanctions were levied by Janet Yellen on Russia. And all of a sudden, Compass Mining lost control of that facility in Russia. So, Vladimir Putin has an extra 100 terahash from me. Thank you very much. I did lose one of my machines that way. But the point is that for a period of time, I didn't have a home for my machines. I cannot run them economically where I live. I managed to get lucky and find a situation that's like a personal friend of mine who's actually in, the Southeast US and has really cheap power now. So I'm paying close to 4 cents now. And so I'm able to basically run my humble little fleet of miners and get Bitcoin somewhere around, 65 to 70,000 roughly is the sort of price that I'm getting it at. So as long as we're above that, I'm mining profitably. Now, last year when we were below that at several points, because we chopped around between 70K and like 58K, there were times where it wasn't that profitable, but over the long haul and also in the last year, I added more hash rate to my little fleet and basically probably for the rest of this epoch at the energy cost I have, I'll be okay. But again, the halving's coming in 3 years. That's probably gonna end my mining at some
It
point
feels
because
it feels a little bit like the oil business, like
it's insane, Thomas. It's like every single facet of it is insanely competitive and squeezing you. So as any miner of scale, if you want to actually survive and you want to last in that industry, you have to constantly grow. And that's why it should surprise no one that every single epoch you're going to have mining pools go out of business. You're going to have mining businesses fail at some point. It's baked into the cake.
So TC, what percentage of your stack has come from mining versus direct acquisition?
Oh my god, I wish more. It's quite small. Definitely single
Welcome,
digits.
Terrence is back. He was doing a pod or doing special assignment, something. Terrence, good to see you, sir. I think Puncher had his hand up first, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, co-hosts. And then it looks like Tomer after that. Good
Yeah,
morning, Puncher.
punchy
Punchy.
strollite.
You are frequently wrong, but on this, you are not. Um, TC, a friend of mine, so full disclosure, I do not run my own node because I am moving between offices and computers, and I am going to do it as soon as I get settled. I've been meaning to do it for quite some time. No excuse, but I do self-custody. People call me that I orange pill, and they go way deep. They self-custody, they also want to run a mine, but then they ask me, why would I spend all the capex and have to continually upgrade on mining Bitcoin? Um, wouldn't it be better for me to just go get a side hustle, make some cash, and convert it into Bitcoin?
Yes.
Um, yeah. Okay. So I think that's what I tell them. Yeah, it probably would be. However, they also ask me what happens as we go through these 4-year cycles and the amount of Bitcoin available to mine continually decreases. Meanwhile, your capex has to continually increase. What happens when all the Bitcoin, there's no more Bitcoin left to mine? Why will the miners still be mining? Just for fees? Can you answer that
Yeah,
question?
it's basically the total reward is comprised of two components. One is the subsidy, which is the amount of new Bitcoin that's issued per block. Currently 3.125 Bitcoin. Last epoch it was 6.25. The one before that it was 12 and a half. Before that it was 25. And when Bitcoin first started, the first epoch, it was 50 Bitcoin per block. So that's the supply of Bitcoin getting issued. And if you don't know, it's the halving that's responsible for the fixed supply. That's how we get to less than 21 million, and we know there's not going to be any more because that subsidy keeps getting cut in half. Eventually, it will be one Satoshi, and then after the next halving after that, there's no smaller unit and there's no more Bitcoin issued. So that's a really cool aspect of Bitcoin, why the halving is a big deal. The other component of the reward is the fees paid by all the transactions that end up in the block. The winning miner gets to choose which transactions go into the block, and so they are tending to pick the transactions that offer the juiciest fees because they earn those fees. Now, over time, what's going to happen is the makeup of the reward is going to shift where the subsidy is getting reduced, because as we know, every roughly 4 years, it gets cut in half. And the transaction fees will make up a larger percentage of it. We get to no more Bitcoin issued somewhere around 120 years from now. So between now and then, humans get a chance to adapt to a larger mix of fees versus subsidy in the reward. I believe it's something like 3 or 4 more uh, epochs. I think it'll start to be close to half and half. But basically, at some point, miners are going to adapt to that. And when no more subsidy is issued, the amount of fees that are being issued for that last epoch where it's only like one sat of subsidy, I think are going to, acclimate the entire mining industry to those kinds of revenue levels. And that's why it's kind of FUD when people talk about that. Oh, eventually the subsidy runs out and Bitcoin's going to fail. No, people have a very, very long time, multiple generations to get used to the makeup of the reward coming mostly from fees.
Thanks, TC. And I think from your reaction, I am correct when I tell them that the asymmetric way to garner Bitcoin for yourself is to go earn increasingly worth less fiat and convert it into Bitcoin. That's the best way right now. Copy that. Thank you.
Tomer.
Oh, hey. A couple of points. Maybe not providing that much new information, but I think Thomas asked, or someone asked, how much of TC's stack has been earned through mining rather than through buying Bitcoin. Just I got involved in Bitcoin mining really early on when I got involved in Bitcoin, and I can certainly say minus 50% of my stack is what I got from mining. I lost many Bitcoin trying to mine Bitcoin because I had to buy Bitcoin mining shares and Bitcoin mining equipment with Bitcoin, and I never got that Bitcoin back. I never even got half of it back. So it, I think getting involved in Bitcoin mining is not an alternative to buying and holding Bitcoin. If I just wanted to make a really important statement, getting involved in Bitcoin mining to understand how Bitcoin works, to contribute to the security of the network, to to learn, to do all kinds of fun stuff. Absolutely. Making it a serious investment that you view as an alternative to Bitcoin, bad idea. And you can just take a look at the long-term history of Bitcoin miners. Now that they're public companies, you can take a look at what's happened to them over some number of years. But it's hard to look at any going back 2 or 3 epochs because none of them have existed for that long. You can look at the history of what did exist before, and it's all out of business. So it's a really tough business. Bitcoin mine, and a little bit more of an esoteric point. Satoshi didn't create Bitcoin mining to be profitable, right? He created Bitcoin mining to decentralize the addition to the ledger and to distribute the coins, in a decentralized manner to people who cared about the network. And the difficulty adjustment, which is the most unique aspect of Bitcoin as an invention, because everything else in Bitcoin is reused things like hash functions, which Satoshi didn't create, and digital signatures, which Satoshi didn't create, and peer-to-peer software, which Satoshi didn't create. But the difficulty adjustment is the thing he did create, and he created that to create smoothness in the outlay of blocks, not with any concern whatsoever to the long-term profitability. He viewed it as kind of one CPU, one vote. And if one person was using one CPU at the time, then the difficulty would be that one CPU could discover a block every 10 minutes. But if 10 people were, then the difficulty would be that one CPU would take 100 minutes, and all 10 CPUs combined would find one every 10 minutes. Now we're at a trillion CPUs, and so you need 10 trillion minutes if you're going to mine on a computer, on a single CPU. But there was no concern given it, and the actual economic implications of the difficulty adjustment are that it kind of drives everybody's marginal profit to zero, marginal production to zero, marginal profit on the cost of production to zero, which is it makes the energy equivalent generally to the cost of producing a Bitcoin. But the capital costs, which are fixed costs, tend to end up being viewed as sunk costs in an operation. Like if you buy a miner, and I'm just going to make the numbers round, for $10,000, and now it costs you $65,000 to mine a Bitcoin through energy, you're going to still mine it. But if it costs 90,000, you're not going to mine it, and you forget all about the $10,000 that it cost you initially to buy the equipment, because you're only concerned with now your ongoing variable costs to mine Bitcoin. So what ends up happening to all these large entities is that it's kind of like the airline industry, right? Like they buy airplanes and then they sell seats at the marginal cost of, like, how much does it cost me to get this person from point A to point B, and make a few bucks at it, not how much, not, you can't add to it the price of the airplane. And that's why airlines are such unprofitable industries. Bitcoin mining is very similar in that regard. So I'm not
Can I just
trying to
pile
knock.
on super, super fast? You mentioned
Yeah.
difficulty adjustment a couple times. And just like my aside earlier about the halving, I don't want people to miss this. The difficulty adjustment is the mechanism that makes sure that the issuance of Bitcoin happens over multiple human generations. It's like 140 something year time frame that the 21 million is issued. The halving regulates that there is ultimately less than 21 million issued. The difficulty adjustment regulates that that happens over multiple human lifetimes. If it was not for the difficulty adjustment, based on the amount of competition for blocks, all 21 million would have been issued probably in the first 3 or 4 years.
Right, and so maybe it's kind of the point I'd make is the halving hurts miners by cutting the subsidy in half, but nowhere near as much as the difficulty adjustment, which doesn't the difficulty adjustment doesn't just double the difficulty once every 4 years. At the time that I got involved in mining, it was having the reward for a certain amount of mining hash power every month. And that doesn't mean that, after 3 months you got a third of what you got. It meant that after 3 months you got a quarter, and after 4 months you got an eighth, and after 5 months you got a 16th. And that point, I basically wrote off all my investment in mining, because what looked like a 10% dividend per month in the first month then became a 5% dividend, a 2.5% dividend, a 1% dividend, and eventually negligible dividend, to the point where there were no satoshis being generated. Now the hash rate isn't growing quite as quickly proportionately as that now, because that was at the time that ASICs were first hitting the market. But it still was it was a very valuable and expensive lesson long term.
I think we had featherweight. If your hand is still up, if not, we'll go to dark.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just gonna throw in there. I feel like that is a reason for individuals to be running like something like a bid axe, in the event that over time, if fees do wind up, if it, after multiple halvings, if fees don't increase as expected, to have like a layer of individual bid axe miners still securing the network, yeah, just seems like a low cost commitment to the network. 180 bucks and negligible electricity to be securing the network, even as kind of like a I guess like a safety net of sorts. But just a thought.
Dark.
Yeah, great conversation, guys. What a pleasure it is to listen to TC and to Tomer and everybody talk about mining. I used to mine back in the day. I don't today, but I'll tell you what I have done, which is kind of interesting. Back a bunch of months ago, I was on a space. I think it was Bitcoin First Space when the Fold app guys came up on stage and kind of laid out what they were up to. So what I decided to do was say, well, I don't really need all these miles, and these miles are sort of undervalued anyway. I got myself a Gemini card and a Fold card. Gemini is from the Gemini Exchange. It's a credit card. It pays 4% cash back in Bitcoin on fuel, 3% on dining, 2% on a whole bunch of stuff. Fold card is a debit card which I can then pay off my Gemini balance and get 1.5% cash back in Bitcoin. So over the last couple of months, just kind of playing around with all this stuff, I've amassed $1,000 in Bitcoin, and just from these two credit facilities, sort of, for lack of a better description, mining fiat into Bitcoin. And I highly recommend for those of you that are, maybe scared of mining and want to create more Bitcoin just from your daily spends, you can combine these two strategies. And I'm getting up around 3.5% Bitcoin back on every dollar I spend, and I'm having fun doing it. And it's kind of become a challenge to see how much I can get every month. Um, anyway, I just thought I'd throw it out there because it's obviously not mining, but it is a way of accumulating Bitcoin, and I've had a lot of fun doing it.
Hey, Eric, I wasn't sure if your hand was still up. If not, looks like we've got
Yeah.
K2. Okay.
Yeah. First of all, highly endorse Fold. I've been using it for about 6 months. I don't think I have I should let my wife use it. I'd have 1,000 in Bitcoin by now too, but I don't use it all that much. But it is a fantastic way to stack Sats. One thing about the mining industry, and all these points are valid and extremely, extremely well articulated. One thing about mining on its own, the way that I look at home miners, because I'm building a facility in Tennessee, which is something that I think we should talk about. Not really what I'm doing, but my partners and I were in the oil and gas industry, so we're executives and pretty well versed on rigs and speculation, extraction, exploration, all that good stuff. We teamed up with some really high quality miners at a meeting about 2.5 years ago. And 2.5 years ago, when I looked at the mining model, I said, there's absolutely no way in hell I'm getting into this because it's a loss leader at very best. So what's been happening, and it's not talked about a whole lot right now, is I think you're going to see a transition to the energy providers being the mining sources at some point because they have the lowest cost of energy. So what we've done, and there's a couple other groups here in Texas that are going to energy providers, families who own oil wells, all those types of things, and we're helping them get into this space. So when I was in oil and gas, I was trying to convince our CEO to put gigaboxes on all of our natural gas wells, sell it to Giga. It was a loss. Everybody who pitched us came in, and instead of getting 250 in MCF, we were getting 225 in MCF. They were mining Bitcoin. We got nothing. So this blend of the energy sector with the technology sector is definitely happening every day. Like I have a call coming up in a few minutes with another group that they have this excess energy that right now the competition is as LNG ports open up, you can start selling 350 MCF gas into Europe for $15-14 an MCF. But I think what you'll find in the end is that you have to have this is the way we set up our mine. You have to have an ancillary income stream. So like we aren't completely dependent upon our mining expertise or proficiency for capital. We actually extract CO2 from the ethane before we run it in a generator, and our first year contract is $2.2 million in revenue just from CO2 sales with tax credits. So that's how you kind of lower the cost of this. But I think one thing people overlook, and it's a valid opinion, is I don't want to get into mining. I just want to own Bitcoin. Awesome. Self-custody. I think that's a great path. I run a miner, kind of like donating to a church. I don't get anything from it. I'm just contributing. That's kind of the way I look at it. If I get something from my miner, great. I'm just blessed where $40 a month added to my electricity bill doesn't really impact me at all. I actually don't even notice. But that's not everyone. I get that. But I think in the mining sector, what you're going to see is a lot of cross collaboration between mining groups and energy providers, with groups like ours that are integrating the languages between the two to be able to say, you guys have this stockpile of tremendous, like you don't even realize what your energy is worth, and you guys think it's worth nothing on one side. And explaining these collaborations with ancillary activity to provide offsetting income for the miners, we are not solely dependent on mining, creates a pathway for treasuries. So when having the CO2 income on our mine in particular, we actually won't have to sell a single Bitcoin for 2.5 years. So it helps the oil and gas company create their own treasury silently off the books, and us as well. So there are a lot of exciting things coming, because our competition in this space is eventually ultimately going to be mining against the government entities that are using zero cost energy. And if that happens, we have centralization issues. So just something really to kind of think about.
Kelly, you're up, and then looks like Tomer's next. Thank you, Eric. That was great.
Yeah, great conversation so far. I just want to shout out the space, of course, and everybody that is paying attention. Make sure you're following all these folks up here sharing their thoughts, and retweet this space out. It's great information. I I do quite well, and I've never been so excited in my life to work. And I say that because the other aspect of mining is, I think a puncher brought it up earlier, mining fiat. I feel like there's such a prescient time right now with an opportunity that's never really existed, that I'm doing everything I can to do things that are all different income streams I'm doing right now are directly related to what's going on in crypto content, crypto education, all these things. But I'm working so hard because I want as much cash flow as possible so that I can mine. Now, when we're talking mine fiat, I mean to buy Bitcoin. Now, on the flip side of this, I actually have a question for Tomer and TC and Eric. Regarding these basically compute centers, right? That's essentially what we're doing. These miners are building these massive compute centers for mining Bitcoin, but at the same time, we're at this weird inflection point with AI and the need for compute. How much of an impact, technically, is it to also allow or have sort of convertible space to basically utilize that for things outside of just Bitcoin mining? Is that something that is in discussion with a lot of different miners? Is it only people that are also interested in offering the compute to AI? That's one question. And then the other thing is, it seems to me on the energy sector side of stuff that unquestionably, it seems like there would be a pretty quick flood towards all these major gas providers, the energy sector, Exxon Mobil, BP, all these, to when they realize how much wasted energy that they can just literally sort of convert into Bitcoin mining to capture that. I'm sure it's not a one-to-one sort of margin on that. It's not just all profit, but it seems to me like once one of those major companies does it, it's going to be an immediate flood with all those. Is that sort of too preposterous to think or too bullish to
Well,
think?
didn't we see a couple years ago Exxon and Shell both announce pilot programs where they're investigating exactly that? So this is actually happening already, and I completely agree. It wasn't just you. I think Eric also mentioned the energy companies I mean, this is the long term direction it goes. Is that you're going to basically see, I think, the warehouse style mining companies that kind of dominate the landscape today get put out of business by energy companies and sovereign nations, who are the bigger fish that have the ability to actually leverage resources on a whole nother level. I mean, I just simply look at an entity like Saudi Aramco, like, sitting there just producing like a large chunk of the world's oil, and how much energy is flared, wasted. Same thing. Look at big energy grid providers, and how much electricity is just grounded because low demand times, there's nowhere to send it to. There's a connection yet to be made by these larger players, where I would say both Bitcoin mining and sort of AI data centers have the ability to soak up that extra energy. It's just Bitcoin outcompetes the AI data centers on a couple levels. Number one, obviously, you have a new revenue source in the form of Bitcoin mined. And number two, you have this location agnosticism about Bitcoin mining that is just a total game changer that AI data centers cannot claim. AI data centers are rather sensitive and need to be in certain locations according to network connectivity, according to weather and environment and all that kind of stuff. Bitcoin mining doesn't give a damn if you take it to Antarctica or the middle of the desert or wherever. It's robust, it's durable, and you can just plug that energy consumption into any excess energy. And I like to think of it as you're bringing the market to the energy source. Just consider on planet Earth how much energy there is flowing around under the ground, in the air, all over the place. And now you have a way to bring a market to that remote energy anywhere on planet Earth. That's Bitcoin mining.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll add to that a little bit. So to answer your two questions, I can answer directly from the street. So this is the stuff I deal with all day long. The energy providers already know this. So the oil and gas companies know this. It's generally your younger executive that's like 3 or 4 rings down from the top, pitching. Most of the oil and gas companies are run by 60-plus-year-old guys who don't understand Bitcoin mining. So there's still quite a bit of turning point. AI actually opened the door for Bitcoin. So in the first question, it was, will there be a flood towards this area? Probably, but not for another couple of years. In general, these large corporations love to use innovative small groups to be able to develop, SOPs for future operations, and that's part of what we do. So you got to have good scientists that know how to do energy conversion into generators. In general, like our operation in Tennessee, the one we'll do in Nevada is very similar. We'll bring portables there and fill them with ASICs units. But the design there, to go to the second question, is how difficult is that? Well, lenders, so we're kind of a blend of equity and debt, cheap debt, which is fascinating. But in that process for our debt forms and filing, we were instructed by our agent to not include Bitcoin mining at all. The equity side wants to hear about Bitcoin mining because they're more aggressive. So in these forms we fill out, business plan, we had to extract Bitcoin mining and put in their AI because they understand that. Not a lot of people understand mining. Everyone understands that AI is coming and it uses 12 times the amount of energy as normal internet usage. But the key here is that there's also real estate people piling into this, because as we build a port, just from my own example, I can't speak for the whole industry, but as we build a portable unit, what we're doing is fulfilling the next gold rush. We all talk about Bitcoin and all kinds of, the next gold rush on planet Earth is for megawatts. That is absolutely the gold rush that is coming. It doesn't matter where or how you can create megawatts. We're working with large battery companies that want to just have us just fill batteries. There's a tremendous amount of revenue in that. But the AI data centers in general are underground. So you're going to have a problem coming with zoning and permitting in the future for oil field electricity generation, where you're going to have to get new permits to dig in a mineral rich environment. So you have mineral rights owners. You have a lot of red tape to cut to get that done. That will be done at some point in time. But most people that I talk to are looking at AI data centers 3 years down the road. We get a call from 1 or 2 family offices a week, and the intro is, "Hi, I'm Bill at whatever family office. We need as many megawatts as you can find." And we generally ask them what the purpose is. These family offices are smart. They're buying up off-grid megawattage as fast as they can. They're funding battery companies to store the energy, anticipating the AI rollout in 2 to 3 years. And when that happens, you'll find a huge gold rush at that point, because you'll have the ability to do say 100,000 square foot facility for AI with 200 megawatts pumping into it from natural gas, and half of that will be used for mining, half of that will be used for AI hosting. If you look at the TC articulated it perfectly. Our business plan was pretty simple. We actually did this because we had the opportunity. The location that we're building on is absolutely perfect. Everything is within 80 yards. So there's no transportation cost. But when we looked at the revenue model, we would say, okay, we can build 8.3 phase 1, 21 on phase 2 megawatts, and get a contract from a future AI provider who will pay us a percentage of what they would normally pay for kilowatt usage just to store it in a battery. And then we looked at Bitcoin mining and said, this is, you go from a potential $400,000 a month revenue to $800,000 to $900,000 a month with Bitcoin mining. So now all of our conversations kind of mix the two. So you're going to see a lot of people popping up using off-grid energy, and like you're talking about, if you're using ancillary revenue and tax credits for CO2 extraction, You're talking about 1 cent to negative 3 cents per kilowatt hour. That is highly competitive. The future of Bitcoin mining at scale, where it is today, is dead in the water 2 years from now. Like, so your big mining groups out there, Core and some of these other guys, they're going to have really stiff competition coming up because the off-grid 8 to 25 megawatt facilities are really rampant in the space right now, which is a great thing for competition. And ultimately, you'll see some of the nation states looking for these as alternatives. I know a couple of people from Russia have come to America talking to the energy sector to figure out energy conversion even more efficiently, what we're doing here. So it's an exciting space. I mean, just kind of keep in mind that, Bitcoin mining at home is like a lottery ticket. Bitcoin mining as a business is a business, and it needs to be profitable. And there are many of them that are not profitable. They're extremely not profitable. And when you have, 4, 5, 6, 8 cents per kilowatt hour for hosting, you can make money with it. But when you're down in that lower number, we're mining around 27,000, which is hard to do. But it just takes that innovation. I think eventually what you'll find out is the AI space will commend and thank Bitcoin miners and energy executives from around this country for developing ways to make what is coming and unstoppable actually profitable, and it gives it the ability to be used by all in the end. So I hope that answers your question that you popped out there about the complexities of where we are today. Like, SBA will give loans for data centers, but they will not give loans for Bitcoin mining. And then there are private lenders who lend specifically to Bitcoin mining projects, but their initial criteria is kilowatt per hour. How much are you paying per kilowatt hour? And if it's basically above 4 cents, the deal's dead. If it's below 4 cents, you have about an 80% chance of getting a loan. So that's just kind of how the industry is working.
You touched on a point right there that I think is worth repeating, which is that a lot of people just aren't looking there, which is just really a short number of years down the road, where participants, and this is these sort of energy generators and sovereign nation level entities, they will put all of the current dominant participants out of business, because it doesn't matter how cheap your energy is when you're competing against giant participants that maybe even the Bitcoin they're earning from the mining is not even first, second, or third in their incentive structure. That is a game changer. That's what's going to actually, you know, rotate the entire field. And I think that in itself is going to really drive a ton of energy innovation on planet Earth, because here's another incredible use of energy and a way to actually harness and make more efficient energy usage that is going to actually drive a ton of development and innovation around that because of the nature of the competition. I think there's such bullish things for humanity long term as those kind of elements of the game theory play out.
Yeah, and TC, just so you guys all know, hydrogen innovation is on its way. So combining natural gas with hydrogen, you can amplify megawatt output from, let's say, a 20 megawatt facility can amplify up with certain hydrogen techniques. You can actually amplify that 2 and 3x at almost no cost. So I think one of the things people overlook with Trump saying drill, baby, drill, number one, that's a drop in regulations to create a higher profit margin at a lower cost for the oil and gas industry, which is needed because money will be made on the exports. But I also think that drill, baby, drill has a lot to do with this type of innovation to protect the Bitcoin network. I think if nothing else, the administration is very pro Bitcoin at this point. That's at least what we're seeing. And the more we give, more we take the leash off of our energy sector, the more opportunities this nation has, and the more opportunities we have. So SMR, small modular reactors, those are about a year and a half away. I just met with a group in Austin about those. Those are really exciting for home usage and home mining. But at the same time, the hydrogen and natural gas energy innovations in the marketplace today are kind of astounding, and probably would have never happened this quickly if Bitcoin and the mining network wasn't so competitive. So it's another extension of Satoshi's brilliance, or the Hal Finney's brilliance of proof of work, is that when you have a proof of work properly incentivized network, that incentivizes the participants in the network to create more efficiencies in the real world. Like I tell people all the time with this conversation about utility, what has a greater utility than balancing power grids, creating energy innovation, and lowering inflation with sound money tactics? That is like the greatest utility of any technology in the existence of humankind. So sorry, guys, I got to hop on a call here. This has been a great conversation. Thanks, Loren, Terrence, and Dark, and everybody for hosting it. God bless you all. Hope you all have a great day. We'll see you guys.
Thanks, Eric. That was awesome. Tomer, we've been waiting to hear from you.
What was the question again?
Please.
I'm just, I actually, I think this is one of the best discussions on mining I've participated in a few months, because we don't have people hyping it up irrationally. So there's only a couple of points that I think if I can hold on to my train of thought over the length of the discussion, that are minutia, but probably interesting to people. So the first is, like, not all types of power generation are created the same and have the same properties. Some types of power generation are really hard to slow down or speed up. When you get a nuclear reactor going and it generates power, and it's very, very hard to reduce the amount of neutrons that split, that affect the chain reaction that creates energy. So once you've started a nuclear reaction, you kind of want to keep it going, and it's hard to stop. And so if you experience declines in demand, you're still generating that power. Where I live in Canada, we have the world's largest nuclear reactor just north of us, about a few hundred miles north of us, a few hundred kilometers north of us, and they literally just vent steam into the air, redirected away from the turbines. They're, and so they're incurring 100% of the cost to generate power, and they're getting $0 for it. So in instances like that, it's very logical, especially if the capital costs aren't high, to have Bitcoin miners on standby for such a time, because then you can turn that wasted energy into revenue. The Bitcoin network demands hash power and pays for hash power. It always. And so that's kind of one thing to think about. The other thing is just an elaboration on a point TC made, which was, it doesn't matter where the Bitcoin miners are. Bitcoin miners actually don't care where or when they are. Bitcoin doesn't care where or when they are. So to the point I just made, like, Bitcoin miners will work whenever. They don't care when, you turn them on, and they're generating hash on the current block height and competing for it. So if you have some that are turned off for some period of time or turned on for another period of time, they're making the same amount of money whenever they're turned on, given the network difficulty. And the network is global. So no matter where they're located, if they're getting access to energy, they're just as effective as if they're close to me or they're close to you. It doesn't really matter. So it creates a very unique kind of consumer of, like, the last consumer of any electricity that's generated. And if you're in a situation where you're generating electricity that has no demand at some point, that then makes you, whether it's at a point in time or location, that's when you might find Bitcoin mining um, sensible. And I think that's the logic that's going to drive a couple of the observations that were made, which is Bitcoin mining is not going to be a standalone independent business where there's companies that own their own data centers and mine and do all this stuff. It's going to be integrated into the worldwide electrical generation grid to take advantage of situations where there is energy being produced that there's no other consumer for. And Bitcoin will be the consumer of it. So it'll find its way. And when you actually consider which kinds of energy are the kind that you can't turn down, like a natural gas plant is the kind that you can turn down. Just like you've got a gas plant in your car, right? And you press on the gas when you want to go, and you take your foot off the gas when you want to stop, and it stops burning gas when you don't need its energy. And so it's an internal combustion engine that's burning gas to make energy to drive your car. It's no different than these gas peaker plants, but those are generally the kind that are the most pollutive. Coal plants, gas powered plants are the kinds that generate the most pollution. The cleanest ones are like hydroelectric. Water flows downhill with gravity, regardless of whether you demand the energy that it creates or not. Nuclear reactions, which also don't produce pollution, continue to chain react regardless of whether or not there's demand for them. So it's actually a move towards cleaner energy at the same time. and really sustainable energy. I think that there's a lot of interesting things like that Eric was just talking about that I'd love to learn more about and see what their actual timing is. I'd love for small modular reactors to be a thing today. He said in a year, man, I think these things will revolutionize energy, not just in the first world, but everywhere in the world where there are brownouts or not enough electricity and the civilization is held back in terms of wealth generation, which is probably in most of the world, you know.
California find a way
Um,
to ban them.
go ahead. Well, and I think the red tape was mentioned, and the fear and the politics and all the kinds of nonsense that gets introduced into our lives through government and their attempt to protect us, their attempt to take a cut of everything, their attempt to slow down the rate of change of certain things and speed up the rate of change of others, like that's all a reality, which is what makes me a little skeptical about whether we'll actually start to see small modular reactors deployed in real world situations in the next year. But whenever they come, they're going to
That
revolutionize
will
energy,
not
and they're going to
happen.
make a ton of, sorry.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself. I just said in 1 year, I will go on the record right now as somebody who is in the parking lot of a nuclear plant right now. That is not happening. But
Yeah, that's
anyways,
my sense too. I mean, like even if they could be made, then red tape would just step in the way. And I don't think there's manufacturing facilities ready to mass produce in the next year small modular reactors. But I mean, these are the essentially the same reactors that have been on nuclear submarines and nuclear powered aircraft carriers for decades. So it's not like it's this brand new technology, but we're not ramped up to manufacture it, and we're certainly not psychologically ready to have these things put put in every like as not quite as close as every cell tower is, but they would make kind of sense as in 2 to 3 times the
can I
distribution of
challenge
cell
that?
towers. Yeah, go
I'd like
for
to
it. Yeah.
challenge that because every single hospital has dangerous radioactive materials that are able to give you as high of a dose as somebody who was cleaning up Chernobyl, right? I mean, you're talking cesium, the nastiest of nasty radionuclides, right? To do medical imaging, to do various types of just nuclear medicine, right? So, and actually, most of the deaths that have occurred from nuclear materials did not occur from anything that came out of any power plant anywhere. It's because of misused and misplaced orphan sources that come from medical equipment. That is where most nuclear related injuries and deaths have come from. And I think it's crazy
Like we're
because,
not disagreeing, macro. Like I'm 190% pro nuclear. I know that it's a
oh,
safe thing,
I
but we
know.
like because we've done the homework. The problem is our are largely fear fueled civilization hears the word nuclear and is filled with fear, because they've heard of the atom bomb. Nuclear bombs are bad. They've heard of 3 Mile Island. They've heard of Chernobyl. They don't want these things in their neighborhood, not because they understand the safety or danger of them, but precisely because they don't. They misunderstand how safe these things are, and it will require a long range act of education to say, do you know what? In the entire history of these small modular reactors on something like 100 warships over 30 years, so we've got like 300 years of experience. There's not been a single injury. There's not been a single exposure in nuclear power plants, all over the world. There's been however many. There's not been a single death as a result of accidents in any of them. And people will question this and go back and forth, and it just takes a long time to change the psyche, right? Like if we all grew up in a world where there were nuclear reactors everywhere, and most people, and we all at least knew someone who worked in a nuclear reactor who could explain to us how safe it is and what the procedures were, and so on and so forth, we'd be much more acclimated to it. Like everything that people do in industry is dangerous. Every factory is dangerous. There's machinery in there that if you get your hand stuck caught in there, you'll lose your hand, maybe your life. Right. So everything is dangerous if it's not treated respectfully and understandably. But people don't panic about saying, oh, we're going to build a factory in your neighborhood. And they're going to, oh no, people are going to die. people don't react that way, but they do react that way still to the psychology of nuclear power. And so I think that that's really what
And
needs to be done. Yeah.
yeah, I do think that that narrative is shifting, and if you look at younger people today are much more pro nuclear than they've been in the past, and I think the public sentiment, generally speaking, has shifted quite a bit in the positive direction over the last 10 years. Obviously, there's still a long way to go there. There's a lot of misinformation on the dangers of things, and it's kind of like just take fire, for example. You can do a lot of damage with fire. Fire can be very dangerous, but you can also do a whole lot of good with it. And at no point does anybody say, oh, we should just stop using fire as a civilization, right? Yet, unfortunately,
No, I
that
mean
was.
we do have politicians who actually say that, right? Like they're banning natural gas stoves in people's homes. So
Those people are Malthusian idiots, or they're either Malthusian or idiots, or probably both. But yes, I agree. That is fair. There, you do have the political class that is willing to stoop to that level of stupidity. Um, but yeah, anyway, sorry. Somebody said power plant 3 times, so I had to come out of the ether. It's
no,
like
that's fine.
Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. So here I am.
That's
But
fine.
no,
And we were talking about Bitcoin mining, so we can turn the conversation back towards that and away from the psyop
I was
that's
I was
against
gonna say, be
civilization.
careful. I'll nerd out on power plants for too long, and we'll lose half the listeners. So I don't want to do that. But I'm also happy to talk about mining, as you all know.
You haven't plugged in any of your personal miners macro over at the nuclear plant you're at?
Look, Terrence, believe me, the thought has crossed my mind. But no, I have not. I have not.
We do have other, just stuff, I guess, happening in Bitcoin. I read Pete Rizzo posted something about the German ruling party pledging to pass a pro Bitcoin legislation, which kind of ties in with what Calabar said. I know we have a lot of differing views on when it comes to what government legislate regarding Bitcoin, because it's kind of like the antithesis of the ethos of Bitcoin. So I kind of agree with that. I've heard a Brazilian company, I can't pronounce it, Meliuz, is going to do the strategy. So that's kind of interesting. I read that today. I don't know how much of this stuff is actually true, because usually when I read these things, I try to go cross-reference it and look for, the source, and some of the sources are sketchy at best. So I haven't cross-referenced some of this stuff, but I mean, it looks like. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Tomer.
Yeah, I was gonna say like breaking, lots of bullshit
Yeah,
headlines,
exactly.
right? And the
Yeah,
tendency to exaggerate these headlines, like if you'll get a headline that says some nation state is committed to doing this, and what really is some minor politician, not even elected, said that if they were elected they would look into doing this, right? And that's the level of exaggeration that you get. So nobody in power has said anything about doing these things, and the person who's not even in power who said something didn't make any kind of firm commitment themselves either. That's
100%.
yeah.
Yes,
As
that's
long as you end that statement with "buckle up," then it's fine.
yeah. Throw a caveat on all of these posts.
Big
Yeah,
breaking.
big breaking, big breaking. No, I
Big
mean,
breaking.
it's I struggle because I used to make fun of Dennis Porter for all of those big breaking announcements and whatnot, and I've just come to the realization that I just need to leave him alone, and he's in the long run he's probably a net positive for Bitcoin, and I need to just bite my lip. I'm exactly, feeling the same way Tomer is regarding a lot of these things. I do like to read them, but I am becoming ever increasingly pessimistic when I read them. But I still, hey, throw it out there. So I know, like Joe C, I read one of his posts, and I think he's been listening anonymously to these spaces, which is neither here nor there. But he was saying something about he believes there's a 20% chance that the U.S. government actually buys Bitcoin this year. So I don't know. That was just some of the other things that we were, or that I was reading. I don't know if anybody else wanted to maybe take these last 15 minutes and just go somewhere other than mining, because we didn't really have a topic for today's show or a guest or anything. And so we just like mining just became the topic. So, which is great because I don't think we actually spend enough time as a community talking about these things, and it's super important. So, I mean, I think it's super helpful. But like Macro said, when we go really deep in the weeds on some more of these technical aspects, we do tend to lose some listeners, which is fine. I mean, they would rather go for the excitement. Like when we had Bob on the other day, I think it was Bob. We had somebody on. We were talking. Oh no, it was about the payments processing one. We basically tripled our listenership when we switched to the the breaking, the smoke and the fire and the macro
Okay,
and
dude, here you
oh
go. Here you go. Ready?
okay, I'm ready.
Bi-
Yeah.
Big breaking. M2 supply
Oh
going
dear.
up.
Oh
All
dear.
right. Look at that. Look at the
Yeah.
chart. Look at the
Woo!
chart. 140K by September. You heard it here first, folks. Is this bolt hard
That's what we
enough?
want to hear. That's what we want to hear.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm throwing it out there. Okay. You can record this, clip it, add it to your archives. 140K by September, easy. This is not financial advice. Don't buy options that expire at 140K on your IBIT. But clearly, it's written in stone because as you can see, Bitcoin just follows M2. So that's all it does. That's all we're here for. We're just the tail wagged by the M2 dog. All right, I'll stop.
Yeah. And then there was I was also reading people. It seemed like Misty MSTY had made quite an impression the last couple of days, and people were weighing in my estimation, but maybe we'll like try to get a take from Dark Side if he's available. It was for like I understand when it comes to the Bitcoin sovereignty community and the general thoughts on it, but it seemed like a play if people were talking about trying to sell calls and blah 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 blah. And MSTY, in my estimation, seemed like a play if people were wanting to do that, but without having to actually go through, educate themselves, and pay attention and do all of that jazz. It was a play on that, and so for 1% or 0.99%, you could buy MSTY instead, and then they would play that game for you. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but Tomer did raise his hand, so we will go to Tomer, and then hopefully Darkside will weigh in on this one as well.
Yeah, I just want to caution people because there's a lot of accounts posting on Twitter, and you're all Twitter on Twitter here. That you can buy MSTY to get a stable income, or it's if you don't want to sell your stack, you can buy this. Well, like what are you buying this with? Like it costs money, so you either have to sell some of your stack or not buy and add more to your stack to get this. It's a very complicated instrument. It looks better than its fundamentals are because it's been returning capital rather than paying dividends strictly out of profits. So I would just caution people, like, this is not a substitute for Bitcoin. This is, if you understand it, then it's a sophisticated derivatives play, and you have to, it's a derivative of a derivative. It's it's based off of the price of strategy, which doesn't move in lockstep with Bitcoin either. And nobody's got a good explanation of how exactly it's going to move, when and why, and where in relation to Bitcoin. So it could be a gamble. And if you think it's a steady flow of income, maybe I'll remind you of my mistake in mining, which I once thought was going to be a steady flow in income, but ended up being a increasingly reduced flow of income, to the point where it became no flow of income. These are the risks you face. And depending on, you can pick your starting point with MSTY, and you can see that its stock price has fallen more than it's, like, since the November highs. Its stock price has fallen more than the dividends that it's paid out. So you've gotten no gains. You've paid income tax on some portion of the money that you've invested, and you have lost more face value in the value of the stock than you've gotten in dividends from it. So it's a net negative investment since then. So you just have to be real careful. And there's a lot of people who want to come across as being smart on Bitcoin Twitter, and really, and in really advanced and sophisticated. I would just be careful listening to any of them. And if you don't understand it yourself, don't invest yourself, or know at least that you're investing without clear understanding, and moderate your investment in these things.
I want to add to that. I
Yeah,
know I
please.
saw I think it was British Hodl was one of the posts that I think a lot of
Mm,
this came from, where he was
yeah.
basically saying, you know, he encouraged a friend of his or something to sell a chunk of their stack, something like, you know, a quarter of their stack or something, and put it into this income generating thing. And then that gave them the comfort or the, you know, ability to not have to worry about selling the rest of their stack. And then I saw at least one other person within a short period of time who said that they did exactly that themselves. Oh, I tripled my income, and so now I don't have to sell. And it's really short-sighted because of exactly what Tomer said. Like, you don't know the income's going to remain there, and you know the chances are it's going to fade away. But the other thing is that people are using these kind of strategies and maneuvers to kind of shore up a lack of conviction that they have, and a lack of a an underlying Bitcoin strategy that they've created. And look, this is where the Bitcoin you hold needs to be, you know, correlating with your level of understanding about Bitcoin. And you have to have a plan. You have to have low time preference. You have to have a long term outlook, and you have to have a saving mentality. So people are trying to do these maneuvers to make up for the fact that they're missing those things. They don't understand it all the way. They don't have a real plan. They don't have a level of conviction that they can, you know, weather these market movements. So it's just another example in my mind of what we see every cycle, which is people chasing yield and ending up with less Bitcoin. So, let's not do that, shall we?
Let's go to you, Dark, and then I'd like to comment after you.
Yeah, look, I'll echo the sentiments expressed. Trading options is extremely complicated. It's not for anybody without like real deep understanding and experience. There is no free lunch. I made the point to British that this is really not a tax advantage strategy, and that there's better ways to do it than MSTY, much better ways to do it than MSTY. If this is a road you want to go down, and I got called a cock or some cuck or whatever he called me, whatever. Um, Look, the reality is MSTY is a very tax disadvantaged strategy. If it works, meaning if MicroStrategy goes up, yeah, then it works fairly well. If MicroStrategy goes down, which it has for a good part of the last 6 months, you get murdered, and you really don't. While you're taking in income, you're losing principal. So yeah, I'm going to do a space on this subject in the upcoming days when I have some time, and really kind of walk through the mechanics and how this strategy really works, and what the pitfalls are, what the potential upside is. But I really want to echo what Tomer said, and what TC said. This is not something where you just sell 10% of your stack. In British's defense, he did use the number 10%. He used an example where somebody had $4 million in Bitcoin. They sold $400,000, or raised $400,000 in Bitcoin, and then began earning something like $20,000 a month in income. And there's it's not entirely stupid, right? Like, in a way, what he is suggesting is the Michael Saylor play. But remember, Michael Saylor is surrounded by a crew of really smart financial engineers that understand volatility and understand options and understand derivatives. And thinking that you can just get a free lunch by buying MSTY or any of these income generating products, um, that's like a false promise. So yeah, I look forward to doing a space on this, because it's we could spend hours kind of walking through the mechanics, and what the upside is, what the downside is. But like with any trading strategy, there is no free lunch, right? And the down if you don't know what you're doing, the downside will crush your upside.
I think there's a lot of people setting unrealistic expectations, you know, because I follow some of these conversations, and people are saying things like, "Well, I'm doing this so that I never have to sell my Bitcoin." And I think some of this stuff is coming out of, like, you know, the sort of talking point that Michael Saylor has made, like, repeatedly, where he says, "I'm going to take my Bitcoin to the grave. I'm never going to sell it." And it's again, I think there's some misunderstanding there, because, you know, it's great to hodl. It's great to, like, use that as a meme if that gets you to hold on in the near term. But like, it is savings, and the point of savings, and it is money, and the point of money is to have it when you need it, so that when the chaos of life occurs, you can pay for the surgery to save your family member. You can pay for a vacation to have your family, enjoy that time together. Like, it's money. It's meant to be at some point used. I think there's just like weird mutations of these concepts that are causing people to make odd decisions. And I think that that's like a point of self reflection for myself. I think everybody who's in Bitcoin should be considering what really is your strategy long term. Are you just trying to like, hoard and hodl Bitcoin to the grave, or are you adopting a new monetary system and a savings mentality, which is something that society has lost over the last, 50, 60 years in the fiat world? So I don't know. I think there's important sort of philosophical aspects of it too that really result in just strange decision making.
Hey, let's jump over to Ryan. I think Ryan has attempted or wanted to come up in the past. And so this time they were able to. So, Ryan, let's just jump to you first.
Thanks, guys. So I think I agree with everything that all of you guys have said. If you can buy Bitcoin self custody, buy it. But there is an issue with actually buying Bitcoin if you have retirement account, 401k. You can't actually buy the Bitcoin. I've been in Misty for going back to September of 24. And really what it is an option income play. And so essentially, at the end of the month, right, it pays out a dividend, and then the price of whatever the price is of Misty as of the dividend payout then gets reduced by the amount that they paid you out. Um, if you're not, and I don't recommend messing around with options unless you are just absolutely brilliant and you know what you're doing. But it does take a little bit of, it takes a lot of the risk out of that if you want to go down that path. But also what it does is it throws out this, you know, these dividends, and then you just can reinvest them, right? So I'm not saying it's for everybody. The best argument I heard was the one that Thomas made yesterday. And Thomas, you may want to throw that spreadsheet up in the nest, is the difference of buying MicroStrategy versus Misty, and looking at the rate of return over a period of time, right? But so I don't know if everybody understands that. That's like, thinks this is the greatest thing ever. But you can't actually buy Bitcoin in your 401k, right? The actual thing. So, that's I guess the only counter argument that I think is plausible. So I'll just land it there and throw that out there.
Vinny, Bitcoins. I see your last name is Bitcoins, so I'm a little skeptical, but we're going to give you a shot.
Hey, how's it going? Yeah, thanks for letting me come up. I like to listen in on these conversations, and yeah, I'm actually a Misty holder myself. I do have a not substantial, but I have a big Bitcoin holding already, and I probably wouldn't recommend anyone pick up Misty until they have a lot of Bitcoin in their portfolio. That being said, I think a lot of people have different goals, right? We're all in different stages in our lives, and we all have different goals that we're trying to accomplish, right? For me personally, I hold Misty in a couple different accounts. I hold some in my traditional IRA, my Roth IRA, and then I also hold some in my brokerage account. I'm approaching this stage of my life where I want to eventually quit my 9 to 5 corporate job and maybe work part time or take another job that's like a little bit more fulfilling for me, and where I can kind of take a lower salary, right? And your Bitcoin, it's you should buy it and hold it, but like a lot of people point out, like it doesn't generate any income, so you have to find some sort of other income generating asset to kind of supplement your lifestyle. So I think that's why a lot of people look at Misty. That's why I look at it. And then as far as like why I hold it in my traditional and Roth IRAs. Obviously those are tax advantage accounts, and I kind of do it because it generates monthly dividends for those accounts, and then I can take those dividends and reinvest it into other assets, like back into Bitcoin, for example. So almost like a dollar cost averaging strategy for those accounts that don't normally generate or normally don't have regular income going into those accounts once I quit my job, especially. So yeah, just wanted to share that.
Thanks, Vinny. I think Featherweight's hand was up, but Punchy, you've also come back to join. So let's go with you, Featherweight.
Cool. Yeah, I was just gonna kind of piggyback on I feel like in the 401k and Roth IRA or IRA, whatever, if you are able, especially if your employer matches, um, it seems almost silly if you have a basic understanding of options. Um, to me, my strategy is selling covered calls on Bitcoin ETFs like IBIT or Fidelity's Bitcoin ETF, just selling them, for like double the price that it currently is. Like, I've sold a whole bunch of year out covered calls for IBIT at like $100 per share and generated some pretty decent yield because it was right when Bitcoin was up in the 100,000. So those are looking real nice. And to me, yeah, to be able to just do that on a yearly basis and then just keep stacking more IBIT. I guess, I wouldn't be, obviously, like the previous speaker said, I think you should also have Bitcoin and cold storage. But if your employer is going to match and you're able to generate income and then just keep stacking more Bitcoin ETF shares, and you're okay with, getting paid double the price you paid for your shares, yeah, to me, it seems like a no-brainer.
Pancho Rama.
Yeah, there are those who have been burned, and for the newer plebs, those who will be burned. And I was one who got burned early when I didn't quite understand what it was I was holding. I have done it all, and the amount of Bitcoin that I lost is embarrassing.
Okay, but
I
sorry, real quick.
Yeah,
If you were to double your money, I wouldn't call that
no,
being burned.
no,
That's
no,
not money you're
I,
doubling.
I'm
What's
not.
your unit of account?
Yeah,
In my 401k, it's dollars.
yeah, Feather. I'm not.
Exactly.
I'm not addressing you. This is not a. I apologize. I should have made that clear. But in 2014,
Gotcha.
2015, I sent Bitcoin to someone who was generating yield. And you got to ask the question, well, where's that yield coming from? And you get some kind of complicated answer. And by the way, we sent as a team of guys, we sent somebody over to Europe to look, and they had all kinds of miners, and it looked really impressive. And it all went to zero, right? And they had a website, and I could see my yield every day, and I was making Bitcoin. And then, oh, we got rugged, and somebody stole our Bitcoin. Um, there is nothing better than buying Bitcoin and holding it in self custody. If you have a if you have a IRA, I took the hit in 2018. I cashed in my entire IRA. I paid the penalty, and it's the best thing I've ever done. I bought Bitcoin with it, and I put it in self custody. So if you have what we'll call captured capital, or somebody's matching you and you're getting tax deferral, whatever. I mean, make your own decision. But I will tell you, it's pretty hard to beat the Kager of Bitcoin if you just buy it and put it in self custody. And if anybody tells you they got a fancy algorithm where they're trading against the shit coins and they're making a yield and it's going to beat just I would implore you to run in the other direction. There's no lesson in the second kick of a mule, and I'm the guy who got kicked by the mule. So please, 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 that extra 5 or 20 or whatever they're telling you percent yield you're going to make is nowhere near outweigh the risk you are taking in losing your entire stack.
Or just
Thank you.
never
And
having
that is
like the
fire.
actual Bitcoin. I mean, time is the biggest factor. You have to consider years and epochs from now. And there's nothing that's going to actually hold up and perform better than holding on to Bitcoin. And as time goes on, it's predictable. It's going to cost you more to convert dollars to Bitcoin. And as you pursue any alternative, you are getting squeezed from that ultimate ideal holding, whether by taxes, whether by performance. But if your unit of account is dollars, you're not seeing it. And that's the hardest part is I think there's a lot of really good intentioned people that feel like they're doing something advantageous, but because their unit of account is dollars, they're not actually seeing the true effect of it over a long period of time.
100%. Hey, and we'll go to you in a second, Hathaway. Also, people forget or they just haven't done the research that you can own your actual Bitcoin. You can hold your actual keys in a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA. There are self-directed IRA products. My entire IRA, my Roth and my traditional, I hold the keys for, and it's all Bitcoin because I converted all of it to Bitcoin and I hold the keys. Now, granted, I don't have a 401k. I'm not part of a company, so I get it when people want to try to have exposure, but those are just, synthetics and derivatives. Okay, over to you, Hathaway.
Not an option when I did
No,
it
no,
too. I
I
converted
get
it
you,
to
Puncher.
Bitcoin.
I'm not,
Yeah.
no, and that wasn't directed at you. And by the way, I did the same thing you did before I realized this product was available. Um, but yeah, it was worth it, 100% worth it. Hathaway.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for doing this stuff. And just so I don't forget, when you do that space dark side, please include like a hardy premise that there are going to be people using 401k, Roth, HSA, and other stuff to kind of take some of the disadvantage out of the taxes. Um, I guess the question that I have when this stuff comes up is that I feel like there's a it's becoming like a binary thing, and there's this wedge coming at me where Bitcoin is the best money, Bitcoin is hope. Therefore, why did I buy pants? I could have stored more Bitcoin. Um, but you can have
Pants are a scam. Don't.
both,
Trust me,
right? I
you
mean,
want Loren wearing pants. It's not a pretty sight.
Pants are
we're
shitcoin.
we're all different, right? I mean, so it's like if you have a system that's set up to accumulate Bitcoin and you're bullish, but like you have this other trapped capital and you don't want to take the hit, or you have other considerations where you have stuff that's in traditional finance. I guess I understand that like you're got more plates spinning and that might not be safe for someone who's new, who thinks that they can just jump in and do it. And I did that, right? I followed people and lost lots of learning stuff. But I guess I just don't understand why there's not more of like a third option where you can just do all the above, just be bullish with smaller allocations because you're not going all in. Uh, I, is that like a
What do you mean all in into Bitcoin, you mean?
right? Instead of just like cashing out anything I have in 401k Roth, taking the hit, quote unquote, putting it in cold storage and chilling. I get that is a way to solve it, and it's arguably the best money. But at some point, like how much is enough, and then where you actually get to go try stuff. Like, hey, I'd like to, buy a rental property. Oh, maybe Misty's easier than a
Can I
rental
answer
property.
that in one way for you, Hathaway, that I've been thinking about?
I really appreciate it. Thanks.
You know, and you just partially said it, right? It's the best money. It's better money. It Bitcoin is the best way to save. Okay. So you don't have to do anything. You don't have to know anything. You just save in it. Whatever it is you like to do, whatever you're passionate about, whatever you've been schooled in, whatever you've learned, whatever you've made all these past sacrifices for to do to mine fiat. Like if you are a trader, if you understand, like if you're like dark side and you understand the intricacies and nuances of this stuff, that's amazing. If you are a real estate bro, because you actually have a degree in real estate and you've flipped 40 properties and you understand DSTs and 1031s and how to tax advantage your portfolio, that's great, but that's how you're mining fiat. And I think that's great. We all need to do something. I don't think people should be getting into MSTY or any of this stuff if they don't understand it, but they're just trying to follow these people on Twitter and they're like, oh my God, I can do this and I can earn income. Income is just a rebrand, it's just a reward for what is otherwise illiquidity. You don't need income, you have income. The appreciation rate of Bitcoin itself is greater than any income. You can just slice off what you want without the risk, as far as the risk reward is there. So When you're saying like, why can't I just allocate a little bit of this or go play with a little bit of that? You can, but it's gambling unless it's your thing. And I think that's the important thing. If it's not your thing, if it's not what you do, if it's not what feeds you and you have all kinds of insight and expertise and talents for it, well, then it's just a gamble. Like, so that I think
I
that's the
agree.
risk and that's what we're getting at. So get
I didn't mean
everything.
to say it wasn't a gamble. I agree it's a gamble. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I'm
Can
not
I
disagreeing with you.
possibly
This
like put
just
it in
conversation's
a
been
different
popping up.
way?
Go ahead, TC.
Yeah, look, there's been a whole variety of different financialized assets that people have used as savings over the last, our most of our adult lifetime. Let's call it 50, 60 years ish. Okay? Real estate, bonds, stocks, all of these things have been financialized. And whether people realize it or not, that has replaced savings. If I go back to my grandparents, rest in peace, they lived through the Great Depression and they actually had very simple means of pulling themselves up from that period of time, which was just work and save. And the money wasn't being debased the way that it is now, and they actually could in just a few years save enough money to buy a house and vastly improve their lives. That's what this is all about. Bitcoin is just a tool. It doesn't require you buying a piece of real estate and holding it. It doesn't require you putting trust in other humans that they're going to run their company a certain way and you hold shares of equity in their company. Like all of these other dependencies that come baked into those other assets, it's removed with Bitcoin, and it simplifies and in my mind it revives the ability to save for the individual, and that is it. You still have to figure out where your income's coming from and how you're going to put food on the table today and tomorrow and next month and next year. Bitcoin will, over time, the longer you hold it, begin to emerge as not only a hedge against the debasement of your currency and your purchasing power of your income, but you'll get to a certain point. All you have to do is look at people who've been in Bitcoin for 3 epochs or more, and most of them can start actually living off of some of their savings. And so it's a fundamental strategy shift in a world where everybody's chasing dollar gains. And I think we're at the point in the story where the debasement of those dollars is absolutely nullifying the gains that you think you're making. And that's what Bitcoin really changes, is like, if I just take the amount that I could save and instead of putting it into a piece of real estate or some stocks, I put it into Bitcoin and I hold that for 3 epochs. Now it is going to counteract that debasement that I'm going to experience over that time. And I can dip into it anytime because it's liquid, 24/7 available capital that you can use for whatever chaos the world and life throws your way.
I just injected that into my veins. Thank you very much. You're up, Puncher 75.
Yeah, just to add a little bit to what TC said, Hathaway. I think all these assets that have been financialized, you might see a time where they seem to be undergoing what I think it was Mises said is a crack up boom, where they appear to be becoming more and more valuable. Like houses are getting more and more and more expensive. But the actual store of value component to that one day is going to fail against Bitcoin. And what I try to do now, what I've learned over whatever it is, 12, 13 years now, is I try to save as much as I can in Bitcoin. And I try to earn as much fiat to live my life humbly. And anything left over, I convert to Bitcoin. I don't think it's a great time, although it's a personal choice, for those who've put everything into Bitcoin and now are like almost eating off their seed corn. It's a personal choice. You can do it. But I see a lot of people, especially down in El Salvador, where they're they're disappointed that they have to use their Bitcoin to say buy a pizza because they know deep down that pizza is going to become more and more and more expensive. So I think the best balance is to what Terrence said. Use your skills that you've learned in the fiat world to generate enough fiat to live your life the way you want to live it. Everything else put in Bitcoin. Never touch your seed corn and use fiat as long as it's still being accepted. And then when we're through this epoch and then we're on Bitcoin, well, then obviously everybody's going to be spending their Bitcoin.
What's seed corn?
We call that Bitcoin.
Bitcoin is what you put away that you don't touch. That is your savings.
Oh,
And
gotcha.
it's like burning your furniture for firewood. I mean, you could plant the seed and get, but you don't want to wait. So you,
Let's see. We had Coin Bazaar left. How about you? Point one BTC.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Yeah, so I'm gonna just go back on what TC said here, and a lot of the actual Bitcoiners as well. I'm not really like somebody that knows a lot about finances or economics or anything like that, but there was a mind shift once I finally learned what Bitcoin is, um, and that's actually what I'm gonna explain. I feel like it's basically run by the fiat mindset that you have to get rich quick and retire early and never work again, but Bitcoin to me taught me that it's more of not really like retiring early in a sense, but more of finding a purpose in your job and what you do. Um, Especially with the basement of everything nowadays, Bitcoin is supposed to allow you to actually work on what you want. Still, like TC said, have income to provide for your family. It's not like you just sit your ass down and play video games forever after retiring. I mean, some people can do that, but that's not the purpose of a human being. You're supposed to always keep moving. So I feel like Bitcoin just changes that mindset in a sense of like instead of trying ways to, kind of out hustle yourself. Hustling is good, but just like overworking yourself, trying to find different ways of earning more of this, essentially worthless paper. It gives you an ability to actually save what you currently have, save your time from the future, and find something that actually gives you purpose, right? And in that sense, once you find that and you earn income through that way, you just keep adding that onto your Bitcoin and save even more time from your future. So I feel like it's a sense of being able to actually save for your future and still having a purpose in life without having to find different loopholes like Misty or something like that. Um, Again, I'm not condescending here, but it is something that you have to be aware of. Yield is still yield. Unfortunately, I learned that the hard way through Luna. Back in the day, I was always hard on Bitcoin, but I tried different ways of finding yield, and Luna was like the main yield machine back then. Leveraging their stable coin and everything. So, but you eventually learn that that's not the purpose of what Bitcoin is. It's actually a whole mind shift. It changes the way you view the world in regards to your money savings, and it allows you to actually gain actual purpose in life. You don't necessarily have to stop working, and honestly I don't think you ever should in a sense, because like I said before, you should always keep moving, keep providing value to the world, and that's literally the point of proof of work as well. So yeah, it's a whole mind shift that happens once you actually get into it, but some people unfortunately have to learn it the hard way. I did. And sometimes even saying it out in these spaces sometimes doesn't really help, but at the end of the day, to each their own, but I just want to give that out there for you guys.
Thanks very much. 10 million sats. You're up, Tomer.
Yeah, to follow on what Point One Bitcoin was saying, you're all crazy. Um, you're all insane, but it's not your fault. There's like a mass formation psychosis that we were all born into, which which is that money is something that the government makes and that they should be trusted to make it and that they will make it for your own good, and just trust them and just work harder if you're poor and work for money, and money is the value, the dollar is the value of all things. And we walk around in this world asking what the net worth of a person is in dollars, and all, there's so many things that have infiltrated our presumptions, and were indoctrinated into us even when we were little kids, so we didn't have any defense against them, and they're all wrong. And the thing with insanity is, society deems insane the people with the ideas that don't correspond to the ideas that the mass of society has. But that doesn't make those ideas right. It just makes them popular. And I think Bitcoin is this awakening that helps us see some truths for the first time in our lives, not just abstractly and theoretically, like, oh, the Austrian School of Economics says X, Y, and Z. But, and maybe if we look at this point in history in that country, we can see a little bit of Austrian economics at play, or other theorists, have other ideas. But Bitcoin is kind of this little shell, this little bubble of sanity, or at least a different idea that might be deemed insane by the rest of the world, but actually seems to make a fair bit of sense when you study it and look at it. And it gradually restores your mind to a sense of sanity. And it also restores your ability to live to a more natural way where you don't have to hustle every day, hustle somebody else, or watch out for somebody hustling you. It's a completely different mindset, and it's difficult to adjust to. And then once you've adjusted to it, it's odd to live in because it's not the world you were brought up in. Like, I'm still living on planet Earth. I didn't leave the planet, but I live in a very different world now after 11 years in Bitcoin than I lived when I first heard about Bitcoin. And I was like, oh my God, this might be an amazing way to make more fiat money. I'm like, I could get rich. And like, though all those goals that Bitcoin lured me in with are no longer the goals that I set out for myself. It's a completely different life that I'm able to have, different choices that I'm able to make, and choices that, in a sense, to some degree, come with having more financial flexibility, but just with a clearer mind and set of purpose in terms of what I want to say yes to and what I want to say no to. So I'm trying to build out on what Point One Bitcoin was saying, but in many other dimensions.
JJG, I wasn't sure if your hand was still up.
Oh, hey. Yeah, it was. I just, I've been following the space for a while. I don't have that much Bitcoin or anything like that. I just think all this is interesting, but it seems like everyone's talking a lot about allocating into yield or cash flow and all that. At what point, like, let's say if you got into Bitcoin like in 2013 or something, you have 150, 200. Why would you even bother with any of this? You know, at what point do you just like sell? Uh, you just create create this taxable events, whatever it is that everyone's afraid of, and just sell your stack. How much money is enough to where you don't need to worry about any of that stuff?
Well,
Is it
JJG,
200?
it's a great question you're asking, and I want to tell. First of all, I don't think you need 100 or 200 Bitcoin to be in a position to say I've probably got enough Bitcoin to take care of me for the rest of my life. But what you don't know is how much. Like, so let's say you have $5 million worth of Bitcoin, just to pick a round number. Why? And I think what you're saying is, why don't you just sell it? You got $5 million. If you're a reasonable human being, that's enough to live for the rest of your life. And I think the question that comes back from a Bitcoiner to you is it? We've had numerous inflationary events in recent history that might make 5 million feel like 2.5 million. If you have a couple more of those, you end up suddenly having $800,000 worth of purchasing power. Whereas holding on to Bitcoin, if you've been once you're in it for a while and you get used to the long term up only nature as opposed to the short term volatility that feels like a roller coaster, you just sleep better at night knowing, well, I've got a certain amount of Bitcoin and it will be liquid. It might be worth 20% less, or 100% more at some point in time, but I don't want to sell it all now and be in dollars, which are very risky instruments. I think that's the mindset that many Bitcoiners have, and I appreciate your point. I think many people are selling a very greedy story to others. It's like, hold on to this, don't sell any of it, don't take care of your needs, don't buy pants, don't buy chairs. I think that's an extreme view that when it's taken seriously doesn't serve people well. So I do hear your point, and at the same time, I sleep better at night being invested in Bitcoin rather than cashing it all out into dollars, which I worry about their future purchasing power. So
I don't even mean cashing it all out. I just mean selling it. Like if you have 1,000 Bitcoin, what's selling point 0.1 a month? Like if the Kager is what everyone says,
if you listen,
45.
if you have 1,000 Bitcoin,
Yeah,
that's a
what's this
very rare story.
scenario of a
Even
thousand?
when I first got into Bitcoin, people who'd been in it for a couple of years were saying, "Oh, it was the goal to get to 1,000 Bitcoin." So I think when you're talking about 1,000 Bitcoin, you're talking about so few people. Like, I just don't think maybe one or two people on through Twitter who have that kind of Bitcoin, but
I just mean if you have enough to where you don't have to worry about selling one, and it's not gonna. Yeah, if
Sure.
it
Yeah. No.
appreciates, like who cares at that point, right? That's
Yeah.
what I'm.
So
That's what I'm
When
trying
I
to
was
no,
say.
at that
coming
point,
up, it was
sell one.
get 6.15 Bitcoin, and now today, like, good luck people getting a whole coin. And so, that's the other side of this, is that the realities of people stacking today is that it's incredibly challenging. And again, I think this is the vulnerability that human beings have, is everybody is looking for a shortcut. Everybody's looking for a way to accelerate their progress and to get to the goal faster. And the truth is, and what Bitcoin is trying to teach you in so many ways over and over again, is there are no shortcuts. It's called proof of work. You have to do the work, and you have to put yourself in a situation where you have more income than what you spend, and you save that income in Bitcoin. That is what savings is. And it's a lost art. I don't blame people for not having an intuition about this, because it's a cultural thing. My grandparents knew that inside and out. They grew up with it. But the generations today are not growing up with it. All they know is credit cards, borrow and spend. There is no concept of savings, and it's all over our culture that we're missing that. So it is a bit of rewiring that you have to do with your perspective on the world, how you live your life, your expectations about time. What do you expect tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, next decade? Like, you have to actually experience and shift your perspective so that you change your expectations and you change your perception. Then you start seeing it come together. And a lot of these shortcuts that present themselves are clearly distractions, and they're sort of like offshoots from the primary path that you should be on. So that's the important thing, and it's tricky to see when you're starting out. You can't just take someone else's advice and try to repeat the same thing, because chances are you're in a very different scenario economically, and especially as far as your expectations and your perspective and your time frames. So you have to cultivate that. There is no shortcut to that. You've got to actually evolve yourself.
Yeah, I mean that's another sales tactic from the fiat world, right? To sell you a yield product. Just because they're telling you, hey, this are the different ways that you can work to earn more, but they're not really telling you that it's all because the currency itself is getting the base, right? So it's just another tactic. And once you learn that, you're able to actually understand it. And like I said before, it just gives you a way of shifting your mindset. So yeah, it's definitely in regards to all of that.
Professor.
Hey there. When these spaces come on, they bring up so many questions. Every time I'm waiting to talk, I hear somebody else say something that brings up something else. So I'll try to be as straightforward as I can. Um, through the help of like British and everybody else, the thing that I am most effusive about is all the different products that right under our nose, the very things we're talking about, the Bitcoin playground is growing right around us. We're talking about income generating. We've talked about getting Bitcoin backed loans, soon to be insurance. Everything that takes place in the TradFi world is happening for us. And we argue about it, but there's all kinds of things coming, whether we like it or not. It's happening right now. And I'm in my early 60s, and so don't have the knowledge of traditional finance that a lot of you guys have. However, I'm light years ahead of people when it comes to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. So everything I do with an eye on doing it through this telescope, this microscope, and I love it all. And the other thing that I find interesting is, and I know that British brought this up, and it's totally valid in exchanging your Bitcoin for MSTY, but also you don't have to sell your Bitcoin. You can buy it with your stupid cash, and do it that way too. There's not one set way to do any of this stuff. But I just want to let everybody know, more than anything, it's very exciting, man. This is good stuff. Thanks.
Loren, I'm not sure if it's time for us to close out the space.
Hey, did we want to give British a shot at the mic too? Because I think I've
Yes, I
had some
just didn't
people.
see his hands. I mean, he's British. I figured he'd
He's
politely
British.
raise his hand. I
I
didn't
know
see
we could
anything.
be opening Pandora's box here, but some people were inquiring, let's just say, to hear from
Good
him.
evening,
How are you,
gents.
British?
Excellent. How are you?
Great. Good. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, it's so I wrote a tweet and that tweet now has 700,000 views. And then I did a video and in 48 hours it's got a combined 100,000 views on YouTube and X. And what's been interesting for me, because again, I don't really fit into either world, right? I from with my background, I don't fit in the TradFi world, and I also don't fit in like the pure Bitcoin world. So I find it, I have a unique position, right? And my unique position sort of allows me to observe all of the entertainment, the entire rainbow of entertainment from both sides, from what I like to call the gold bug Bitcoiners on one side, and then the absolute fiat maxis degenerates on the other side, right? And I think that what's going on right now is the security, and I've been saying it for a year and a half, 2 years on video. Like it's the securitization of Bitcoin as an asset class. And as this happens, there are going to be tools that become available to Bitcoin, like that became available to real estate. Mortgages were not available to bricks. Mortgages became available to real estate after they became houses and after it became an asset class. So this is the process that Bitcoin is going through. What's remarkable to me is how many gold bug Bitcoiners have got their heads firmly shoved up their asses and they're not even willing to learn about what's going on through this securitization process. And it's also astounding to me that so many fiat maxis, like that come from the TradFi world that I was in, are still denying Bitcoin as an asset class. So I get to see the entire spectrum of this. Now, as far as the yield products go, I can completely understand how Bitcoiners have got PTSD from, their dream VC backed Bitcoin company that rug pulled you when you should have known that they were running a $20 million burn rate funded by shitcoin VCs and you gave your money to them and they went away. MSTY and the yield markets, the options markets, are not that. These are American listed exchange traded funds that are trading the most liquid derivative markets in the entire world in a heavily regulated fashion. So the people trying to compare this to that is stupid. There's literally people on my timeline telling people to not go for the yield option, but lend your Bitcoin, basically hand over your sovereignty, quote unquote, using their words, hand over your sovereignty and lend against your Bitcoin and borrow against it and then spend that. It's like it's my complete it's a lack of education of what happens to an asset once it is securitized. And this is the important part of this conversation because yes, right now it is possible to live off of Bitcoin by using these products without having to sell your Bitcoin. So the other young man that was talking about why don't you sell your Bitcoin? It's because I know people with way more Bitcoin than me who understand TradFi markets that are trying to figure out how to never ever sell their Bitcoin. And that's what you should be doing as a Bitcoiner if I can give my humble 2 cents on that. You should be figuring out how do I never need to sell my Bitcoin ever, and how do I always have exposure to that. So yeah, you can shift exposure now to income products and income things,
Can I
and this is
ask you
only going to get
a
bigger.
clarifying question on that, British?
Sure, sure, sure. Please.
Because I feel like in Bitcoin there's memes, there's hyperbole, there's a lot of sort of extreme things that are said that don't actually play out in reality that way. And when I hear people say never sell your Bitcoin, what I really translate that to in my head is don't sell in the next 3 cycles.
Hmm.
Because that's honestly the real challenge is people have to hold on through multiple volatile market cycles and still be holding on the other side of that to be able to have the appreciation of their asset in Bitcoin
of their savings, the magnification of their purchasing power, that then is useful on the flip side to actually change their lifestyle or benefit them in some significant way. And so the challenge in my mind is really just about attaining a long-term outlook and a low time preference, which is totally counter to the cultural and societal forces. And it's not about never selling. It's about, can you transport yourself a decade or so into the future and still be holding on to this thing? Because history shows us that most people fail to do just that. So are you really saying never sell, or are you saying something to the effect of what I'm describing? TC, that's a really good point, right? And this is, again, it highlights what I'm trying to say about this new buyer that I've been trying to say this for 2 years. Like, this new buyer that's coming into Bitcoin, this new owner that we're rotating into, will never sell because they never have to. It's not a Bitcoiner way of saying it. They literally will organize their lives and their portfolios to never ever sell. It's the same way they've bought land. It's the same way they bought real estate. It's the same way they bought equities. They will never sell. And it's because of these tools that are available to a securitized asset. So Bitcoin is going around thinking that never sell means 1 or 2 cycles, will hand their Bitcoin over at $1 million. And by the way, Bitcoin gets to $1 million. That's a $21 trillion market cap. Real estate's a $350 trillion market cap. BlackRock's people have no problem giving you $1 million for your Bitcoin when it is the scarcest asset on earth. And this has been my mission, is to try and help people understand how the new buyer, the new piranhas, the new predator is going to see this asset, so that you don't end up going, I held for 3 cycles, let me pat myself on the back, and now my grandchildren have no Bitcoin left. Yeah, I don't know. I just see it as a different strategy. It's like, to me, there is a real true savings strategy which doesn't necessarily put some ultimatum on the unknown future. I mean, and that's really the way that I look at it. It's that the future is uncertain, the world is
TC,
uncertain
you
in a
said it
variety
right
of
there.
ways, and Bitcoin goes a
You said
long
it right
way
there.
to hedging those uncertainties.
But you said it right there. It's a savings strategy. And MSTY is not a savings strategy. I mean, like that, you have to divorce your idea of savings from investing very hard with MSTY and products like it.
And
Because what that
MSTR. And MSTR, by the way.
and really what you're doing is you are exposing yourself to different parts of the risk curve. At the far right, you would say there's Bitcoin, where unless you are trusting your keys to somebody else, I mean, your trade-off is don't F it up. That's your trade-off. On the other side of that would be a product like MicroStrategies, where what they're saying is we are going to lever our Bitcoin in order to play in the capital markets, in order to play the capital market game better than everybody else. And then there's another completely different take on this, which is, as I've been studying it more and more, what I'm seeing on MSTY, which looks a lot more like what I've studied in the oil and gas world, where people are, what they're doing is they are studying the flows of a producing asset, and then other companies go in and as a class they purchase these distributions, which are monthly cash flowing assets. And if you can do that, what you're doing is you're basically following the adage of oh man, the Babylon book. I'm skipping right now, but anyways, that you take 10% of the money that you earn, and you allow those gold coins to make more gold coins for you. So where Bitcoin is the gold coin, and you should put the gold coin in the safe, what MSTY is doing is essentially being that that
spoon maker or that belt maker that you used to, or that shoemaker that you used to lend money so he could go borrow, so he could go buy products and make shoes and then pay you a return on his shoes that he made later on. It's just that today in a securitized world, we do that through the stock market by betting, essentially betting on companies and their performance through their public listings. What's especially interesting about a yield product is, and especially this one, is the level of transparency required for them to operate gives you, the investor, a really kind of unprecedented level of security as to what they're doing. Now, can they screw up what they're doing? 100%. Can they not hit their trades properly or not close them out because they're options? And can they get caught on theta burn or something like that? 100%. But that's not what they're trying to do. And if you realize that's not what they're trying to do, if you just kind of sink into it a little bit longer and you say, oh shit, all they're doing is market making. Oh my Lord, they're just market making. Because that's a business, guys. That's just a business. That will make money all day, every day. And so if they've realized here's a very liquid market that we can be market makers in, and we can take advantage of the flows, then what your risk is in MSTY is realizing when you've stopped entering a market where there could be volatility, because that's what eats your NAV up in that kind of product. So if you're going to sit through this, through thick or thin, you're probably going to get burned. If you're, however, going to study this from the perspective of relative to the underlying assets, how could this perform? And where are we on the cycle? How could it perform relative to the cycle? You do have to take a more nuanced view and say, macro picture, what's that look like? Medium term picture, what's that look like? And short term picture, what's that look like? And if all those things kind of line up to, holy shit, nobody knows what's happening, and Donald Trump is ringing the uncertainty bell, well, seems like the perfect time to be owning an asset that is producing yield based on volatility, was just basically a number value for uncertainty. So if you can take all of that into account, then think about this. Maybe you shouldn't be thinking about selling your Bitcoin for MSTY. Maybe what you should be doing is taking some of your earned cash flow and setting aside and buying a few MSTY every month, and then letting that little engine start buying you Bitcoin. Because you'll start buying more Bitcoin if you buy MSTY to buy more Bitcoin through the MSTY. I'm gonna land it there.
The free money
Hey,
machine.
So well said. Firstly,
Free
we're
money machine.
congratulations. That was so well said.
Who was that
we're
speaking? Because
Look,
I want to
we're
look,
follow
trying
that.
to
I'm sorry. I'm fully triggered. There's anti-patterns here all over the place because you mentioned it yourself. There's a spectrum, and Bitcoin's all the way extremely on one end of the spectrum. Bitcoin is savings technology. Bitcoin is fundamentally an anti-pattern to all this other stuff. And all this other stuff is also denominated in fiat units. So it's easy to kind of feel like you're doing something that you're not actually doing longer term.
But wait, because I've done the deep dive on, hey, I need to flip my business checking account into Bitcoin. And that's different than what I'm talking about if I'm talking about on a personal level. So on a personal level, I would agree with you. Probably best to really stick to saving $5 a day in Bitcoin and don't F it up. Seriously, guys. Don't get cute. You will lose. However, if you're sophisticated enough to say, I'm a business owner and cash flows matter to me, then that's a different conversation because that is not savings.
We're trying to land the plane on the entire space here because we've been running a little long and I've got an appointment. But we're gonna turn it over to Dark Side here because I think he also mentioned something about having a space dedicated to just this topic. Go ahead, Dark.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have a space dedicated to this topic. But let me just correct some of the things that have been said. Um, BitPetro is right in some respects and wrong in others. Uh, MSTY is not a market making strategy, it is a market taking strategy. It is programmatic selling of volatility to create fiat gains on a fiat investment, right? Like you have to differentiate. Like one of the problems with this room is you have Bitcoin only and Bitcoin maxis that live and think in a Bitcoin world. And now we've introduced now into this concept, financialized Bitcoin or fiat Bitcoin, right? Like that's really what we're discussing here. But, you know, just to kind of boil this down, MSTY is a programmatic income generating strategy on a fiat investment in a fiat world that exploits characteristics of Bitcoin, right? But it is not a market making strategy, it is a market taking strategy, right? Market making is a form of arbitrage. This is not at all arbitrage. It's simply exploiting Bitcoin's volatility to create income generation. If Bitcoin goes down, you are going to lose. If Bitcoin gaps up substantially, you will massively underperform the value of Bitcoin, right? Like those are the trade offs you're making. And then in return for those trade offs, you're getting exposure to Bitcoin volatility in a fiat world, right? And it's that simple, right? Like do not cross the kind of harsh lines that exist between a Bitcoin world and a fiat world, right? And I agree with British. Look, you know, understanding the financialization of Bitcoin, kind of Bitcoin in a fiat world, is extremely important. If you're looking to generate income off a large stack of Bitcoin, this is a great way to do it. But it's not. It's a very very different investment than owning Bitcoin. The two of them have almost nothing in common. Like one is a volatility play, and one is a play on the price appreciation of Bitcoin. So let me just lay that out there. You know, this is a fiat investment in a fiat world on fiat rails, and that has a lot of purpose for a lot of people. Not everybody, but it's not it's definitely not a saving strategy, and it's an aggressive strategy. So you know, you get that exposure to Bitcoin. So
Most
I'll
importantly,
just
it's not set it and forget it. You cannot leave this thing alone. If you take your eye off the ball, it will lose your money.
Yeah, I mean, look, we when we hold this space, we're going to talk about also using options on MSTY, which has options, right? So
Hey, Dirk,
there's,
do you have any idea when you're going to do this, just to give
I
people a
don't know.
heads up?
I've just been so
Okay.
busy.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe
Okay.
tomorrow night, because this one's going to be deep, right? Like I've gotten hundreds of DMs and messages about wanting to discuss this subject. I'm really looking forward to it. I'd love to have British up there, the Petro. Love to have you up there. Like, let's
I'll
dig
always
in.
be there if you run a space. No worries.
Thanks, British. Yeah, let's dig into it. But again, there's just these. We have to differentiate between fiat investments on fiat rails and Bitcoin investments in self custody. The two of them have very little in common.
By the way, I
You know,
think I think when you say that, right, I completely agree with you. But when you say that, it sounds like the message that's being put out there is confusing those two. And that's not what is happening. It is at least from my perspective, I don't know what anyone else is doing. It is very, very clear that these are two separate investments with two separate intentions, with two separate styles of thinking. There is no way that anyone, in fact, I put a tweet out literally 2 days ago saying Bitcoin is not MSTR and MSTR is not MSTY and MSTY is not Bitcoin. These are separate things. They're layers on top of Bitcoin. The beautiful thing about everything, though, is that it's built on a Bitcoin base layer, and that's the thing as well, where people are trying to compare, MSTY to the Tesla one, TSLY, and it's like you cannot do that because they're not the same. One has a nuclear reactor of growth attached to it, which is going to generate and yield different results compared to Tesla. Then people are arguing about the volatility of Bitcoin going up and down. It's like there's so much misunderstanding and people are just latching onto different things to try and justify their complete and utter ignorance. So I hope more conversation happens. I'm glad I actually put that tweet out because it looks like it set off a shitstorm. So that's good. And those people that are smart enough to figure it out, hopefully, will end up holding on to the Bitcoin that they've worked so hard to accumulate and actually use these tools to give them an income when they need it.
Yeah, I hate to rug this space because it seems like it's got a good flow going now, and I'm super intrigued by the subject matter. But it sounds like Dark's going to do a good old space tomorrow on this. Usually we go around the horn, but I really gotta go. I should have left 15 minutes ago. Anyway, great space, guys. Due to popular demand, we've been asked to upload onto podcasts. So we are uploading under the name Bitcoin Today Recast. So if you do want to go listen to parts of it today, we went pretty in depth in mining for the first part, and then our good old MSTY here towards the end. So you can go listen to it on podcasts. I think we're up on a lot of them. I don't know. It's kind of not just me trying to play around behind the scenes here. Anyway, have a great day, everybody. Tomorrow, Terrence is hosting. I think he has a guest. I'm just kind of out of the loop a little bit on that front. But anyway,
Thanks, Lauren.
I look forward to. Yeah, hey, thanks for dropping in. Come in anytime. I like different perspectives because I think we learn the most from those. Sorry if you didn't make it up on the stage. We tried to work in as many people as possible and tried to accommodate a really good discussion without name calling and with mutual respect. So appreciate all of you guys. Go out, have fun, live your life, enjoy. This is just a means, guys. Like life is what it's all about. Your time is more valuable, your loved ones. So go, enjoy those things, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.